And we're live. Okay, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Nice to see you. As always, I'm late, I know. And today I have not one, but two fantastic guests. And that is pretty awesome. One last minute guest, I have to admit. But I said in the tweet, I think, that we might have an additional one, which is pretty awesome. But let's go into the into the kind of order. First of all, I have the fantastic Geekzone here today. Carl, welcome to the stream.
Thanks, Chris, man. It's awesome to be here.
And second, I have a surprise guest, which is the Red Book, Stephen. And it's pretty awesome to have you here as well as a last-minute guest. I'm not afraid that we I was not afraid that I was alone with Geekzone, but it's always nice to have like an additional or two guests. So it's pretty awesome to have you here as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I've been on once before, so it's good to be back on to talk about something different. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, pretty awesome stuff today. And we have a lot to discuss, I feel, because there was some interesting stuff in this episode. And very curious. I think we also, when it comes to opinions, we have like, a lot of, I don't know, potentially different opinions, kind of, I feel. So that might be pretty interesting. And I would say we just to get our viewers on board, we would just start with how each of us liked the episode. Also, of course, I give out a spoiler warning. We at least assume you have seen the 6 episodes, and probably there will also be book spoilers. So be aware of that. And yeah, let's start maybe with Carl with Geekzone. How did you like episode 6 of Rings of Power?
So to be honest, I would probably be somewhere in the middle. Like I've seen it as a bit of an average episode. It's cool that like something finally happened in terms of a battle. Like the story is moving on a bit faster, but I wasn't too happy with the way, I guess, certain elements happened in the battle, the dialogue, and certain ways the characters were portrayed. The one thing which, again, they always do, which is really, really good, is the cinematography, and the visuals are always top-notch. But honestly, I think some of the past episodes, and particularly the Dwarven episodes, I enjoy them much, much more than this one.
Okay. Stephen, what's with you?
Kind of a similar opinion, but I think episode 6 is quite deceptive because I think episode 5 was maybe so bad, in my opinion, that if episode 6 wasn't as bad, it seems like it was a really good episode. So I think there's some parts that we'll obviously get into detail, but there's some parts I was really surprised with. What they were mentioning in the show. I didn't think they were going to be able to mention certain things, and they did. That was quite a nice surprise, but there's a lot as well that I didn't really like, and that seems to be consistent through almost every episode. So I'm kind of middle of the road as well. A lot of missed opportunities, I'll say, but some genuinely surprising conclusions. So a mixed bag, I'll say, about episode 6.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe people know my opinion, kind of. I have to say I'm relatively positive on episode 6 because, I don't know, I finally felt like that at least Galadriel made more sense as a character in this episode. But of course, there was also some pretty, a few letdowns in this episode as well. But I appreciate that the show finally starts, that the actual story started. I feel like this episode should have come much, much earlier, like episode 4 or something. Then maybe the pacing would have been a bit more tolerable. And yeah, it also did, as you said well, was that it also covered a few topics and mentioned a few things which I appreciated a lot and felt, even for me, if you go, we probably will discuss the Adar and Galadriel dialogue quite a bit in this episode. Maybe not, we will see. But that I felt was also very Tolkienian in a way. Like, it had definitely some important themes that I would not have also, as you said, expected to see in the show at all, and that I appreciate at least, even though clearly this episode also has its weakness, and that has to be always be kept in mind with even being positive. So I said it in my review as well, it's not like 10 out of 10 material, but in context of the show, it was definitely probably one of the stronger or maybe strongest episodes so far, I feel. And yeah, in chat we also have like a bunch of votes already, and it seems like chat is also relatively positively, like 55% say like the show was actually good, 3 out of 3. In the middle, 30%, and on the low end, 1 out of 3, only 15%. So that kind of summarizes this interestingly well. So I would say we can go through the show kind of chronologically, but this always leads to the problem that we might, I don't know, get lost a bit in too many details. Do you have like a particular scene you guys want to discuss? Except maybe for the Galadriel and Adar dialogue, we come to that probably in a moment. But I don't know, maybe we could start with the Isildur, or I don't know, or with Adar burying the seeds or something.
It's up to you. I don't mind at all.
Yeah,
what you want to start with?
Okay. So maybe we start with the seed at the beginning, which I found kind of interesting. We see Adar also burying some of these seeds, and we later learn in the show from Arondir that this is kind of an elvish tradition, though in his version of this tradition, he only buries like one seed at the big start of a battle and one at the end of it. But Adar also says the same as Bronwyn answers to him, so basically new life in defiance of death, something like that. And I found that's kind of interesting. What I liked about that was that it was kind of already like these Alferin seeds were already a topic in previous episodes, and that I found pretty cool. That it kind of felt like it made sense. It's not something that is in the books I'm aware of. Maybe you know some obscure note of Tolkien from somewhere, but I'm not aware of that Tolkien mentioned something like this anywhere. But I would at least argue it could have been mentioned somewhere, if that makes sense. I mean, it's not. We don't get too many details on that, but I felt like it was kind of fitting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it was a cool concept to have. Like, definitely the whole, elves palanting before the battle, and I guess it is an interesting throwback to Adar's and his elvish roots. But at the same time, I'd wonder if Adar was one of the very first elves that were corrupted. Would he still retain, let's say, those positive traits which are elvish in nature? Would Morgoth have allowed something like that to happen or to be retained? So again, it's like this battle between the Tolkien fan and a person who's enjoying the series without that prior Tolkien knowledge. And I've had this feeling throughout the series. It's like every episode there are things which, as a storyline, as for the narrative, they are really, really interesting, but there's that conflicting element with my expectations as a Tolkien fan, I suppose.
I think I agree with what Carol was saying. There's a lot that has to be made up, obviously, for the show. I don't see this as an adaptation. They're not adapting a specific book or story, but with this planting of the seeds, I've never read anything that would indicate that actually happened, but it's one of these concepts that, like Chris said, you can imagine maybe happening. It's not completely out there. I liked it for this idea of, I'll say humanizing, even though we're talking about elves, but it's going back to that opening quote of the entire show with nothing's evil in the beginning. So it's letting you see that Adar is not just a faceless monster that the hero is going to behead. It's actually trying to give a bit of depth to this leader of the orcs, which in turn will almost humanize the orcs as well, which a lot of people might not agree with, but as we know in the text, it's what they're talking about with orcs being corrupted, and I think that's what they're going for, and I think it's quite a good idea. I've nothing really against that scene, and we'll obviously get to the Galadriel Adar scene, but this is kind of, pardon the pun, it's planting the seeds for that scene. So I think it's a good inclusion, a good scene.
Yeah, completely agree. It's my opinion already an interesting start. If maybe I can find the particular scene here a bit better, it looks almost a bit like his children are kind of looking like when he gets up. It's really hard to find a good screenshot of a good frame for that. But yeah, you see the orcs in the background, and he does it like behind the tree. Some suggested that maybe he does it so the orcs don't see it. But how it's edited, in my opinion, I think they see what he's doing. Like it's. Let me just see if I can bring this somewhat awesome. But you see, he's getting up here on the screen, and that's. I don't know. They see it, so it can be debated if he does it in secret. But as you hinted at, it's kind of like he has like this certain elvish part in him that is still there. Maybe it is just like a routine that he was used to once. Maybe it's, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But it seems his transformation to become an orc or something like that, or whatever, or however he was used exactly. It's not completed, and there's still some elvish person left in him, and that makes his character, I feel, so interesting. And I feel like this is a very subtle scene that still has like a lot of impact on his characterization, and I think that is one, like, often I criticize the show for not being very elegant, but this, for example, is a case where I would say that's quite elegant from a storytelling perspective, because there is not many words or sentences here, but you still learn, okay, a bit more about this character, and that is, in my opinion, yeah, as you said, pretty well done. So,
I think, if I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. Go for it.
It's just I was seeing a comment where it was saying humanizing orcs goes against the concept of good and evil in the universe, and I just wanted to say that's completely wrong, and just pointing out. And just to respond to your point, I don't think he'd be doing it in secret, because it's almost as if he's telling the orcs, as their leader, the one that they're calling father, that they're not, perhaps they're not monsters. It's I don't think he'd be hiding doing this from them, because they seem to acknowledge that he's different from them, and it's almost as if they're aspiring to be something like him. That's how I kind of view it. I don't think as the leader he would hide doing this from them, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, same. Out of curiosity though, Stephen, regarding the whole humanization, but like, would you enjoy that let's say, a potential good side of the orcs is kind of implied throughout the series? Would you think it's like would it be something you agree with? I don't know.
I think the idea of humanizing the orcs may seem kind of crazy, but nothing is completely evil, as Tolkien says, and I think the idea of some sort of redemption for orcs isn't a crazy idea, but I still think it's maybe too far. It's not possible. They're not going to do it, but there's this attempt to do it, and give them a home and all this, and stop them being the creatures of the darkness and all this. But they're going to perhaps be drawn to the greater evil, which will be Sauron, and they'll fall in with Sauron and his lies. It depends how deep they're going with this, but I think if you love it or hate it, I'm still disagreeing with the guy in the comments saying that orcs are absolutely evil. They're not. Tolkien says there's no absolute evil. Even Morgoth isn't absolutely evil, and orcs can be redeemed. It's just probably not going to happen. It just depends how deep the writers are going with this, but I don't think the idea of giving orcs this, someone trying to give them a chance is foreign to what Tolkien had written, and I think it's an interesting idea. It makes Adar quite an interesting character, in my opinion, as well.
Because I do agree with you that it's definitely makes it more interesting. And to be honest, this is when it comes to the way orcs are portrayed in the books, I personally enjoy when we kind of see that somewhat, I wouldn't say good side to them, but certain traits which are admirable. Like let's say the loyalty of the Uruk-hai, or the leadership.
Ugluk, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of leadership role and all that kind of thing.
Or even there's that interesting dialogue in Kirit Ungol where there's like some sort of camaraderie between the orcs as they're descending the stairs. Like I enjoy those bits, and when it comes to seeing these things in the series, in terms of a narrative, they make things a lot more three-dimensional, and I do find them interesting. But then part of me I do feel that maybe the implications they'll be putting forward is kind of that the free people are doing a bad deed in slaying the orcs. Like when Adar is talking to Galadriel, he kind of implies that, that these orcs deserve to live. They're children of Ilúvatar also, and it's kind of implying that the deeds of the free people are in themselves, there's an element of murder or killing to them. And that's where, again, from a Tolkien aspect, it's kind of perhaps crossing a bit of a line in what I would have thought were Tolkien's philosophies. That in orcs, I'm not sure if he mentioned it in one of his letters, if he was talking about the orcs, I can't remember. But I think at one point he says that he wrote that they could only be redeemed by Ilúvatar. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was about orcs, but I could be wrong. Like, it's been a while since I read the letters.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chris, go ahead. We've not spoken in a while. We're just going to take it over there.
No problem. The people hear me speak a lot here on this channel, so they probably don't mind a little change here. But yeah, there's a letter 153, where Tolkien maybe talks a little bit about if orcs are redeemable. It should be said that it is a letter that was not sent. It's a draft letter. So in a way, canon can, in my opinion, be a bit debated for letters that he didn't send for reasons we don't really know. But yeah, here in this letter, though, he writes basically that let me just see if I find the exact passage. They would be Morgoth's greatest sins, abuse of his highest privilege, and would be creatures begotten of sin and naturally bad. And then Tolkien adds, I nearly wrote irredeemably bad, but that would be going too far, because by accepting or tolerating their making necessary to their actual existence, even orcs would become part of the world, which is God's and ultimately good. And yeah, he continues a little bit about them having souls and so on and so forth. So it's relatively interesting in this context. But it was, I guess, always kind of a problem in Tolkien's world if orcs are kind of redeemable, if they have a soul and so on and so forth. It's a very interesting topic that you discuss here, and I feel like it's definitely, though, a thought Tolkien has, even though you might maybe some people might not agree with this idea. But yeah, I'm also on your side. I really like the more three-dimensional way they are portrayed, and find it kind of fascinating that you kind of feel for the orcs almost in the show. And that is, in my opinion, also a better quality. Like it's kind of interesting to see orcs like this, and it also makes their existence kind of tragic if you think about it. That as soon as a Dark Lord is there, then they become slave to the will of the Dark Lord, basically, for the most part. As also Carl said, there was this there's this interesting dialogue in the Tower of Kiris Ungol chapter in the Lord of the Rings. And in that chapter, we kind of learn that, the good old times before the bosses were around, something like this, and they make plans to go somewhere where they can kind of live in peace. It's a very interesting little characterization Tolkien adds to them, and I fully agree with Carl there. It's really interesting to see. So I think even though they are tools for the Dark Lord and slaves to his will, there's still some nuance to it, and I have at least to say that it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, just to add to this, Chris, because again, I do think it's really cool to see, but then I'd wonder, from what we've seen so far and the way things are being portrayed, I would argue that you could say that orcs almost deserve a home, from where
Yeah.
they're protected from sunlight, because that's when we go into kind of breaking the lore from that portrayal. Because if I wasn't familiar with the material in the past, watching the series, you'd kind of feel it. If they could somehow suppress their warlike nature, and they just like stay peacefully in the land of Mordor with the smoke and covering the sun, they kind of deserve to live from the way things are being portrayed. And that's where I kind of become a bit uneasy, I suppose, with that sort of direction, even though I do enjoy it, if you know what I mean.
You have
Yeah.
to also remember we can't say that the forces fighting against them are perfect either. Tolkien kind of acknowledges that the views of elves and men on orcs are they're not perfect either. They will kind of slay them if they see them. They'll fight against them because they believe that orcs will always fight against them. And you have to also think that idea you're just saying with Mordor, it's almost as if, would the orcs actually just remain in Mordor in peace, or would they start expanding their own realm? And what do you do in that situation? Do you try and live with orcs? And we can't just assume elves and men are morally perfect and can deal with orcs in like a perfect way. That there's going to be conflict. So it's I think Tolkien acknowledges that he's not written perfect races here. It's there's always going to be conflict between them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fully agree. It's definitely interesting detail they add here. I have to give them at least credit for that. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff, like especially episode 5 was, especially for lore fans, hard to endure, even though I think from a TV show perspective it was a decent episode, but just very triggering for the lore fans, and if you know the books, and especially for fans of Gil-galad, it was a show with, how to put it, like a lot of problems. But lore problems. It's but we discussed this last week, so we don't have to go back into this dark place again. But I don't know. Do you have anything still to add to this particular section here?
I'm good from my end.
Okay, no, we can move on.
Else, because I don't know, I've always got the suggestion that we look a bit more into chat. So I would maybe say if chat has like a specific question or some hint here regarding the topic of orcs and regarding the topic maybe of planting seeds and this lore bit, maybe feel free to ask in chat for a moment. Maybe we can discuss one or two things, because I feel like we should be able to get through the show relatively well today. But it's an interesting. It's definitely an interesting element that I did not expect to see in a show like this, and it kind of makes me kind of positive, like in that regard. That often sometimes people say, the writers, they have not read the books or anything. I feel like that can't be true when they add some details like these, also the language details. There are clearly people in the show making this who have knowledge about it, and it's, in my opinion, also not very difficult knowledge to achieve, because you just have to read the books, right? It's of course there's a bit more to it in the complexity and getting like an idea of how everything is written, but it's kind of interesting to see that they go into these details, but in a way it's also unfortunate that they sometimes have some very strange ideas at the same time that becomes sometimes a bit concerning.
I think some of it's quite forced as well. Like they've got this interesting bit of information, and they're like, we'll have to force that into this conversation. It can be a bit jarring that it just comes out of nowhere. It doesn't really fit in. So even though we'll talk about it, but even though the Galadriel Adar scene was probably the most interesting in the episode, there's some details he was talking about where I was wondering, well, how does he know that? And it felt like the writers were kind of showing off that information that they could put in. But we'll talk about that when we get to that scene.
Yeah. Sasha asks, regarding the planting of seeds, do you guys think it will have a bigger impact in later episode seasons, or is it just something to fill gaps?
I don't know. I guess it's possible, like, that they use some sort of throwback, but I can see it going either way. Honestly, it's a small detail. Maybe we can see it, happen more in the future. Maybe, like if they had to plant a tree, and then I don't know. Maybe it could be also like the way they plant the white tree later on. Something like some weird way to keep the elvish tradition before battle. I can see them doing some sort of reference in that sense.
I think it's already like this is almost like the final moment related to this, because we had that scene with the tree getting cut down, and we had that scene, and now we've got this scene with the seeds being planted as well. I don't know how much further they could take it. I also would disagree maybe with what Sasha said there with it just filling in gaps. I think even if it's just a moment across a few episodes, it's still had a kind of impact. So even if they don't return to it, it's served its purpose. So I wouldn't say it was just kind of wasting time or filling in gaps. It had a role to play.
Just a small point on the seeds. Something which I do appreciate in the series is that when they want to, like, for these sort of narratives, they kind of allow they trust the intelligence of the viewer to follow them. They don't like kind of make it obvious that he's going to plant the seed after we know its purpose. It's like it's up to the audience to link it later on reviewing the episode once more. And I do appreciate that as a series. It's nice storytelling. It's trusting your audience. It's a cool way to go about world building. I feel like the kudos to the writers in that aspect.
Yeah, 100% agree there. So, I don't know, maybe there was another question I found interesting. Do we know what he said to the tree, day 18,300 and counting says? I can answer this really quick. He says, anin absene, and that means forgive me, which is kind of interesting. I struggled a bit translating it at the beginning, because it's kind of a little shenanigan they do here, because the A is like a little particle that basically indicates the imperative, and in Quenya, and Tolkien translated the Lord's Prayer into Quenya at one point, and I think published in Vinya Tengwar, issue 42, if I remember correctly. I could be completely wrong here. Maybe it was something, whatever, it doesn't matter. And interestingly, there's also forgive us. The wording is in it, and there it is amen absene, and so they just have to change basically the form from us to me, and then it becomes amen, then becomes anin, I think, as it's in the show. It's kind of it goes full circle if you think about that. To my knowledge, Karl Hostetter, who also published the Vinyar Tengwar issues, is also part of like is a consultant for language stuff in the show, it seems. So it kind of makes sense that the Quenya, for the most part, is very good in the show.
I'm gonna trust you on this, Chris. It's like
I did my research on that.
I wasn't even aware of it, so it's like, the Chris Encyclopedia, 100% faith in it and the research behind it.
There was like another question I found interesting. Okay, that's an interesting question. That do we see much in this show? Yeah, it's at least hinted at, so we could mention it for a short moment. There was a question by Sidetracks. Do you agree with the sizzling in the sunlight characteristics in I'm in Two Minds?
Personally, I don't mind it, but sometimes it happens, and on occasion they're fighting in sunlight and they're totally fine. So it's if it was more consistent, I wouldn't really mind. I just feel they bring it up when it's convenient, and sometimes, yeah, there's a bit of a contradiction in what we see.
Yeah.
I think it's silly. They're not vampires. I've always seen it as been more like a mental impact on them. It's this is just me. I'm not saying this is what Tolkien had written, but I've always seen the orc's reaction to sunlight being a reflection of Melkor's reaction to it. It's he fears it. That fear has been put into the orcs, and there's a psychological fear of it. And we see this happen with the Uruk-hai chapter in The Lord of the Rings, where they are enduring it, but they're not the Uruk-hai, the orcs that came from elsewhere. They're kind of enduring it because they have to, but it's affecting them, and they're not burning up. I think that's like far too literal reading of orcs and sunlight. I think they could have been a bit more subtle and interesting with it, but it's not the worst thing in the show, so there's other things to complain about.
Yeah, I don't think it's like lore friendly, definitely. Like, I think it would make much more sense, as Steven is saying, but I have the exact same thoughts. For what it is, I wouldn't mind it too much.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in a way, I can kind of understand. As you said, it's not lore friendly. They just maybe they can endure it. They maybe are weakened by the sun, but they don't necessarily start smoking and burning. That's a bit much, in my opinion. But they want to transport, I think, the idea in a visual way, and this kind of helps. But it makes as Stephen pointed out correctly, that it feels a bit inconsistent at times, and that makes it a bit unfortunate, if that makes sense. And that in that regard also, I don't know, it's a bit much in my opinion. Maybe there could have been a different way to portray it. I'm not sure. I don't know, but
like I said, from a point. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, and it's just from a visual communication standpoint. Yeah, sure, it can make of sense, and maybe they try to make it more understandable why Mordor is later covered in ashes and blocks the sunlight and so on to give this impression. Like, you can sell the scene, I think, better in this contrast before Mount Doom breaks out and after it. You can probably sell it better, but I don't know.
I think you could maybe have a moment where have the orcs, some battle in the sunlight, and you can tell that they're maybe not at their full strength. They're kind of not having a good time with it, and then contrast that with a scene where it's darkness, and then show that they're more ferocious and dangerous. That's a good way of showing that sunlight affects them without turning them into vampires, I think.
Yeah, I think ideally, I think at one point in the Two Towers, some of the Uruk-hai were forcing the orcs to run during the sunlight, and if I remember correctly, they're described as panting, exhaustion, fatigue, and if it was kind of portrayed in that way, that you can see they're clearly in a very weakened state, that would have been ideal. I imagine it's just much harder to show like that weakness in battle, to depict fatigue on the orcs' side. But that's would be a lot more lore friendly, and would be probably better.
Since it's a TV show, you'd probably have to have a character directly point it out to the audience. Point out that the orcs aren't, what's wrong with the orcs kind of thing. Sure. That's how a TV show tends to work. It's a bit on the nose, but you're right. If they didn't say it, a lot of people wouldn't get what was happening, what the difference with the orcs was in that moment. But they've went the really obvious route. But again, it's not the worst thing they've included.
Definitely interesting detail. I was also invited by the German Tolkien Society like some time ago, and we discussed also the episodes. And there somebody pointed an interesting thing out. It almost looks like the skin of the orc becomes, like we see it here in this scene, almost becomes, besides the little bubbles that are building up, more human again, which is kind of an interesting way in the depiction how they show it in this scene.
Yeah, that's actually a photo of me when it's
Ah. Yeah, I can imagine. But it's it's like I said, I agree with you. I don't mind it, but I can definitely see why some people say I'm a bit in two minds about this particular detail. So yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, in the past episodes they also shot it like that. You see the sun and the orcs suddenly have to go inside and don't like it. So they really try to explain this non-verbally, just by showing the effect. And if you have a strong effect and reaction like this, you can communicate it. I think it's simply better. But yeah, whatever. Let us move on, else we're getting lost too much here in details, because we still have quite a bit to discuss. Like I said, if you have anything in particular you want to really talk about, feel free to say so.
We could talk about something that keeps popping up, and it was something that plagued the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. What do you think about the vast distances and how they're actually portraying time passing? What do you think about it? Do you think there is an issue with characters suddenly appearing somewhere else? Like we see the Numenorians arrive. How soon do you think they arrived, and are they just bypassing the fact that Middle-earth is pretty enormous? Or do you think it's a smaller issue than people are making out?
I think so far it's a small issue, because like in Game of Thrones, they were teleporting to 4 different locations which are vastly, far away. So far, if it's just Numenor to Mordor, I'd be okay. Like, I don't mind it. If like the Numenorians suddenly appear in Linden, then we're kind of pushing it. But I think it's a non-issue for me at the moment so far.
Are you kind of seeing are you getting this idea of time passing through watching the episode?
No,
I think
in that
sometimes it's
regard.
not very clear.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you there. That you wouldn't really feel it, but at the same time, I think the way they're kind of portraying the events, you can't have a lot of time pass, because what's happening in Mordor, the storyline seems to be like on a day-to-day basis, and you can't afford to have the Numenorians like stuck in transition, because they'll arrive much later. So they are definitely, time-wise, it's inconsistent from one location to another, but they're the kind of things I would feel are acceptable for the series so far. With the way that, they're compressing the event so much, it wouldn't bother me, I guess, in the bigger context.
Yeah, that's the big issue. The time compression that hangs over everything. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I expected some time compression in the show, and currently it's like it's really massive. It seems like we are very early in the Second Age for the most part of the show, but then Numenor is somewhere very late in the Second Age, and it's these are characters. But then also kind of not. Like it's a weird mix with Numenor. Like Farazon with his plans in the last episode to expand maybe to the Southland and so on and so forth. So I could maybe, even though that is an interesting detail here on this map currently, you see this particular stuff here written, and it's a writing system made up for the show, for the Numenorians, the Adunaic script or whatever they call it. And this actually reads Pelargir, which is kind of fascinating that Pelargir, it seems in the show already exists. That I found very fascinating detail. So yeah, it's really almost impossible with this to really give a consistent opinion or a consistent statement of when exactly does the show, at least the Numenorian part, play its really it's really strange. Like for Mordor, we know, I don't know, when Sauron first came to Mordor, maybe some 500 to 1,000-ish. I think in the Appendix B it's 1,000, right? That he first takes it at least as his realm. And
start building the tower and that.
Yeah, 2,200, 1,200 or so. So it's relatively early, Second Age, it seems, and that is kind of, for me personally, very unusual to see that they are we're this early in the stage. Sauron hasn't even appeared yet, really, except for one scene. Maybe he has appeared and we don't know. It's also a different topic. Maybe we can discuss later. But sorry.
It kind of throws a spanner in the works as well with a lot of people are saying Galadriel is acting the way she does because it's so early in the age and she has to have time to develop to become that figure that we know in the Third Age. But if Ar-Pharazôn is already there and we're pushing for the downfall of Numenor, are we saying that Galadriel's character completely develops in 10 years? Something like that? Yeah. It just seems very strange that it's so compressed, like you're saying. There's things that haven't happened that happened thousands of years before other things are taking place. It's I have no idea how they've worked that out. It's kind of confusing.
It's really strange. If you compare this to our history, if for people probably not aware of the time spans, it's like you make a show about, I don't know, the Roman Empire and I don't know, Caesar. And then you have, I don't know, Martin Luther or something like this in the show appearing. It's basically like that. It's kind of it's really massive how they compress the time, and it makes no sense in a way. I can though understand the problem of a show adaptation, that this is a problem, because else, if you introduce a character of man at the beginning of the show, then I don't know, a few episodes he's dead or so because of old age. It becomes probably a nightmarish to deal with it. So I can kind of understand it, but it's unfortunate in a way. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's I personally, the only way I see if you dealing with this better, if you want to cover the complete Second Age, is you make, what do you call it, an anthology? You just make basically season 1 plays from the year, I don't know, 1,000 to 1,200 or something like that, and you compress this maybe just a little bit so that we don't have to change actors that much, and then the next one plays 400 years later and you have new actors except for the elves maybe, and so on. It's of course also a problem, but that's, I guess, the only way you could somewhat get around the huge time spans in the Second Age if you really want to do this. And it's an interesting topic that also Steve just started here. Was it a good choice to make Galadriel one of the big protagonists of the show, or wouldn't it not be better to just have an important side character in the show and just make up another character? Because when you make her a main character, she needs this character development, and they chose Galadriel's starting point for her character development 12 light years away from the Galadriel we know. And maybe I would have preferred a Galadriel that's just, I don't know, 2 light years away, if that makes sense. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Do you want to go first, Carl?
Yeah, sure. So I feel with the direction they chose for the storyline, I guess the Galadriel being the main protagonist works, but it's always seeing it in the context of the series that we're watching and the series we're familiar with. If they chose to make the series focused on Numenor and they make Ar-Pharazôn a bigger threat, perhaps even Isildur or Elendil could have fit as the main protagonist without an issue. You get what I'm trying to say? It's they built it around her, the story. So it fits. But then if they chose to build it around the character, I imagine we're seeing a very, very different portrayal. So it's really hard to judge. So for the way they made it, they it obviously complements her storyline and it works okay. There are changes I wish we would see in her character. There are things which annoy me, even I believe her armor, there's hints at like a Feanorian star, which is kind of odd, an odd choice. Like there are small things which bother me quite a bit. But yeah, in the storyline they built around her, it fits okay, I suppose.
I've got mixed thoughts on this. I think there's not really a problem with Galadriel being the main character, but maybe not this Galadriel. I think there was potential there, but I thought with it being Rings of Power, Celebrimbor could have been the main figure. Or I would prefer, someone was asking me about this. I had a stream recently where someone asked this, and I would have preferred Elrond as main figure, because I kind of see him as being almost like the main character through the Legendarium through all the ages. He's been involved in so much, and he's kind of there at the end, leaving on the ship. And I think there'd be potential for Elrond to be the main figure, but I can see why they've went with Galadriel. But I think it's maybe not been handled too well so far. But maybe by the 5th season it'll all work, but that's maybe being a bit too hopeful even for Tolkien. But yeah, I completely understand why they've went with her, but I just wish it had been handled a bit better so far. But we're only 6 episodes in, I guess.
There are 2 episodes left though, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
But there, of course, I don't know how many, 44 more coming if every season.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of closure in the next 2 episodes. It's going to end in a big cliffhanger. We'll see you in 3 years, kind of thing. So, I just think there's a lot of room to see what they do with her. But I think so far she's not been handled very well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I really like the actress, but I think often how she's written does the actress a really big disservice, and doesn't really help her. Like, that for sure. But I feel like maybe I'm not sure if you would agree that even though I still don't like this character, I feel like it's not like it's the wrong word, but I feel like she is too different from my expectations, and the show really subverts my expectations big time, if that makes sense. But I feel like episode 6 was the first, maybe with episode 5 was the first episode where she started to make sense. And I felt like in this episode she was less annoying and worked a little bit better as character, and was even surprised that she could kind of also carry this episode with Adar. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think the problem I have with Galadriel is we know that she basically becomes like one of, if not the wisest figure of her race. But even if we're accepting that there has to be some development, which is kind of interesting with the Adar scene, I've never imagined, even in her actual youth, not this second age youth that everyone says, where she's still ancient. I've never imagined that she was so unwise, and she's making certain decisions and she's reacting in certain ways where I just would never. I'm not just saying Galadriel of Lothlorien, well, she has to act exactly like that. I'm just saying the way she's acting, I'd never imagined Galadriel, even in the first age, acting like that. She doesn't seem very wise to me, and I never thought I'd say that about Galadriel, who I thought would have always been wise, but then grew even greater in wisdom. That's how I've always viewed her character. She's very rash and aggressive, impulsive. It just doesn't seem like her. So maybe that's why they've got the Feanorian star kind of thing there. Maybe she's closer to Feanor in this story, but not really the Galadriel I imagined, to be honest.
Yeah, but you think after like 3,000 years should learn to get along with people. That's like the whole course of Numenor was a mess. She's like, I won this thing, she's offending the king, the queen. It's totally irrational on her part. Either that or like completely unaware of the political situation, which again would be a discredit to her character and her age.
That's very strange, that part.
It's
Like
it's
the
really
way she was talking to a ruler, that's
Yeah.
no, she wouldn't do that.
I mean, I kind of like her wisdom. There's this scene in the Silmarillion where she talks to Thingol, to Melian, and about that Thingol maybe should know about what happened on Aman, on the West Continent. And she says, yeah, maybe he should know, but I won't tell him. Like I don't think that was like the wisest answer. So I can kind of see her learning from that point. And sometimes Tolkien states that people are wise, but sometimes the action don't really reflect that in a way.
Okay,
So
the missing Celeborn's a good example of that. The Galadriel, straight after saying he's the wisest elf of Middle Earth, we never get to witness any wisdom, and he seems quite idiotic the way he reacts to the Fellowship. But so you're right. Galadriel, despite Tolkien's efforts, wasn't perfect, but I think in these 6 episodes there's this kind of continuous fumbling that she's doing, and it's not like one mistake that she learns from. She just seems to be constantly aggressive and saying things to people, the wrong people, and saying it the wrong way, and it's just very strange to see, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's also like that inconsistency in her character so for the first 5 episodes, she's obsessed with vengeance, and she would even go so far as endangering her company, as we see in the first episode. And suddenly in the 6th episode, when Halbrand's about to kill Adar, she kind of stops him, telling him not to pursue that vengeance, like it's going to be bad for him. And you could say, okay, so she's kind of making progress, but then 5 minutes later, she's telling Adar how she wants to exterminate all the orcs, and she herself is about to kill him. Yeah, and she's stopped in the final moment. So she's like, she's quite erratic in terms of her I guess her output, or her actions. They don't really they're very inconsistent.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though. I feel to portray her like that. If it wouldn't be Galadriel, it would probably be a more interesting character, maybe even. But as said, she definitely undermines or subverts our expectations of how this character should act. Definitely, so can fully agree with you there.
I think it comes down to Chris, her conversation with Adar, when the elf who's been, let's say, tortured by Morgoth and who's lived among orcs for 3,000 years, whatever, seems to be more reasonable than Galadriel. It's kind of a bad character development on her end. You wouldn't really expect it. Because in that conversation, I 100% said, hey, Adar is making way more sense. He's talking in quite a neutral tone. He's trying to justify his actions, the orcs, and she's just completely disregarding everything. And she's telling him, I'm going to kill everyone, all your children. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and I kill you last, so it's definitely like a bit much, but and like in one of the early streams, somebody in my chat wrote that she behaves a bit. I'm not an expert on this, but like she has PTSD, and it seems like the person said like PTSD people who suffer from that often antagonize, like they see an enemy in everything. I think that's kind of what we see in her, and this maybe what you said dims her wisdom maybe a bit. In a way, but it's kind of there, if that makes sense. That is why she can see what Halbrand is doing is wrong, but she couldn't have done it better herself, because Halbrand, Adar also pushes her like quite a bit. We're looking forward to discuss the Adar section in a moment, but there was also an interesting comment in chat, and I forgot who wrote it, but just want to mention it here for completeness sake. Of course, that Adar plants seeds before a battle. Like, if he was captured as one of the early elves, very early elves, we're talking about Cuivienen before the Great Journey, then it would make no sense, because the elves had no battles until they started fighting each other, kind of. And so this tradition makes no sense in this context, but maybe he was captured later for like a different breed of orcs. Like, when he was captured exactly, I think is kind of vague. And in this show, you also notice that they simply don't have the rights to the Silmarillion in full and other texts of Tolkien, so they can't even mention Yavanna, it seems. But yeah, it's Just to add to this, not sure if you want to add anything to that detail, but would like to focus here on Galadriel if possible.
No, I think
Yeah,
you've covered everything there. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Just one thing, Chris. It's again kind of on the previous topic regards to the inconsistency of time. The time. There was something which kind of annoyed me. So I think like two episodes ago, after our Farazon's son explodes the ship, I believe they have 3 ships left, the Numenorians, or 2 or 3, I can't remember, and
3.
their army's massive, and we see the ship sizes; they're not too big. You know, it's like, how did everyone fit on board? I wish they kind of maybe helped scale it a bit better, because like Numenor.
You've not seen that meme image with the
yes,
it looks like a submarine underneath.
I wish it was like
fuel.
if it was an armada or something, that would be cool, you know. But they had a massive army with all these horses. I'm like, okay, so where did everyone, fit on board? It's
You think they could CG some more ships, don't
you?
What would the difference be?
With the 1 billion budget, it would have been cool, 20 ships maybe.
Yeah, 3 is a bit.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Yeah, I don't understand why, if they've got that amount of troops, why not that image right there that's on the screen? Why not just have 6 ships? It may be more believable, but that's maybe being nitpicky.
Yeah, it probably would be too expensive, because I don't know, I have no idea why they went with this. Like, I looked, like, when there wouldn't be horses on this ship, then I would say, okay, that could kind of work, because I looked up, like, in medieval times. I have no idea how this worked, but not medieval times, like even further back. What are they called in English? Galleys. They have like 200 people on board or something, and they are maybe a bit taller than this, which is of course huge if you have an additional deck. Don't get me wrong here, but on each of these ships, only 100 people have to be instead of 200. So I can kind of see that it might work. Like, if I try to figure out how big these ships are, if I took like a person and considered it's like 2 meters tall, around about 2 meters tall, the ship would be around about 50 to 60 meters, something like that, and maybe 5 meters high in total with underwater parts. I'm not sure. So that is round about the size of a galley.
You have to also think of what's under the water, and then you have horses, but then you have to also think of supplies, and they have to eat on the journey, and all that. That just doesn't seem enough for that force that we see. Again, that didn't really bother me watching it. I think that's, to me, it's nitpicking, but it does seem a bit kind of silly when you see that force that arrives. I don't think they're all fitting on those ships.
For me, especially all those horses.
But even it's like eventually, once the faithful go to Middle Earth, they have 9 ships, if I remember correctly. So that's like triple the armada which was sent to help to attack Sauron. That's where I'd be like, I just wish, again, for scale, I do appreciate if they put in that effort to reflect things better, to make things seem more believable, I suppose.
Yeah.
They could have had 9 ships here as some sort of sign of what's to come or something like that. But again, it's one of these things like, can't remember what we were talking about earlier, the orcs with the sunlight. There's a lot worse than this. It's
definitely.
3 ships isn't the stupidest thing I've seen on the show. So
for sure. But it's were the horses inside the ships when they blew up? I hope not, to be honest. They wrote in chat. But yeah, not the horses.
Just the people, as long as the horses are okay.
Yeah, and the people die, it's not a problem. But as long as no animal gets hurt, that's always the most important thing. I find it's always kind of interesting that people see this this way. Like, of course, we all love our animals and so on, but people dying is of course also horrible, I guess. But yeah, that's a different topic. Sorry.
No, go on, Chris. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, as said, I feel like if we just jump back a moment to the to the time and space topic again. Like this episode also had like some mind-boggling time and space bending like a lot of times, which I felt like why didn't they make this like a little bit better? Like if we look at this map, we see here the mouse of Anduin. Here is or will later be a Pelargir at the river with some other names which I translated in a different stream, but I forgot what is here. I think this is river. What is the Relos? Pelos, I think is the name, right? It is a river in the south of Gondor. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But in this show particularly, like we have some scenes like when they go into this they're fighting in the dark. Adar goes into the tavern. You look through the door and you see it's dark outside, and then he gets outside. It's basically the middle of the day already, while he was 10 minutes in the tavern, and then conveniently also the cavalry just comes, which we also see is already riding in daylight, and they're coming from the east, even though the mouths of Sirion, as we see here, are west, so they should come from the west, not from the east. Like, it makes completely no sense, but yeah, speaking of bending time and space, like, it's often very noticeable and sometimes kills, at least for me, the immersion a lot of time, because I think, okay, I know the directions, and sometimes it works perfectly, and sometimes it makes no sense at all. Like, the whole section in Mordor, like, remember this tree felling scene in episode 3, I think it was, and there was a big tree on the map they showed, which was down here. But then later we learned they were digging close to the mountain, to Mount Doom, which is the complete opposite way. And I mean, think, okay, what is going on there? Like, or how did if they're digging north close to Orodruin, how did they never manage to see the orcs digging there? Like, like if you think too much about it, it felt like a complete mess and very inconsistent, as you were pointing out already.
I didn't even notice they were attacking from the east, Chris. Like, the thing you're mentioning on the village, I had no idea where they're coming from.
And because the sun is rising
behind. Like, I totally,
you know?
these are things which they totally go over my head, man. I'm like, the horses.
I was going to say I did notice that, but I think with these kind of shows, they're not expecting most of the audience to be like Chris. They're hoping they just kind of watch the episode and that's it. And they're hoping that with these kind of details, no one will notice. It doesn't matter. But it is kind of lazy, and you do lose your immersion if you notice it. But I'm sure most wouldn't notice it. But when you do, you can't really unnotice it, can you? It's it bothers you every time. So.
Kind of interesting. In case people wonder, this here is not Minas Tirith. It says, what is the name? I always forget the name of the mountains of the Minas Tirith. Mindolion, something like that. Yeah. I forgot how it's spelled exactly. Maybe I have to look at it. But yeah, it's kind of Mindolluin. That's how it's spelled. But yeah, kind of interesting detail. However, it's definitely noticeable that they sometimes bend time and space for convenience sake, and as the writers need it to be. That's always a bit.
It's one of the laziest things they do in TV. Yeah. It's really annoying. It's one of these things where even with the Numenorians arriving, and it all happens really quickly. It could have been better if a few episodes ago they were leaving, and then you don't hear from them for ages, and then you get that moment when they do arrive. It's kind of less obvious. You've maybe forgotten that they're on their way. That you can see that a lot of times passed, but everything just happens so quickly. The map gets smaller and time gets compressed, and everything just happens so fast, and it's just TV magic, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot like that, like in editing and so on, and sometimes you don't notice. Like, of course, it's a constant, it's not a stylistic device, but simply how films are made. There are certain things you simply never see in a film. Like, you rarely, like, for example, a classic example, phone calls in TV, you never see the other person saying, yeah, I wish you a fantastic rest of the day, see you next time, and then it's always like when the important information is ended, cut, and they hang up the phone instantly. Like, nobody would do this in real life, but it's simply like
no
that.
one says goodbye.
Yeah. It's kind of funny if you look at this, but it's one of these just you don't need it, and you probably don't notice it. Sometimes these things you can, by editing and filming it decently, you can make this appear in the head of the people. Another thing is how time and space is often bent, especially if, I know, stuff is filmed at different locations. Like, one is inside a studio, one is an outside shot or so, and you never see some. I don't know. For example, there it's not really noticeable. I probably won't find it here, but when Kemen tries to blow up the ship in episode 4, it was, right? And just see if I find the scene. It's also interesting. They are basically down in the ship fighting each other for a moment. And let me just see. Now here it blows up. It should be here. Yeah. Here Kemen and Isildur fight each other for a moment. And they pretend they go to the exit to leave the ship in this scene. Let me just see if I find it, because it's always a bit difficult. That was last episode. Yeah. So the last scene you see, if you look how it's edited, is here that he throws this thing here, but you don't even see them move. They're just staring at this. At this burning cloak is now close to the oil or whatever, or to the, I don't know, liquid TNT, whatever it is. And the next, let me just see. Maybe I did it right. No, I didn't. The next shot is this one here. Like, the camera just teleports here, and you see them now coming to this and into this scene. Like, you know what I mean? Like, often movement in shows is a lot of teleporting, but you don't notice because it's edited in a very decent way, and your brain automatically fills the gaps in a way so it seems plausible, as long as it's not too strangely done, if that makes sense. Like, if you have to do really weird cuts for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But this show sometimes exaggerates exactly this too much, so it becomes noticeable. And there, I would definitely say it's not that elegant, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We can certainly say that about the show. I don't really use the word elegant very often with it.
Elegant, right? You pronounce it with a G, right?
Elegant, yeah.
Elegant, yeah.
Oh, elegant. Okay, I said it right.
Yeah, you did. I think we can't expect too much from. I know we want it because it's Lord of the Rings and that, but it is a TV show, and they're falling into the same TV tropes, kind of traps that every other show does as well. They're not. I think we were all building it up to be it's going to do loads of things different, but it's not. We're finding all the same faults that we do in other TV shows as well. So that's probably why there's so much disappointment surrounding it. We're just expecting something magical and new, and I don't think it is, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It's just, I mean, Peter Jackson did simply a very good job, in my opinion, even though there are also parts in it that you can criticize, especially as book fan. And but yeah, it's kind of surprising. And he himself could not repeat this quality, I feel like, with a Hobbit. Like, he was really good point on with a Lord of the Rings, but he was really off at times with the Hobbit films. And it's kind of fascinating that you have like this. You have the same team, the director, you have the writers. Basically, I don't know, the whole crew came back together, but they could not repeat the quality, I feel. And that also shows that sometimes that is really difficult to just nail everything in film.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a certain time and place, and it works, and then you can never repeat it. It kind of fits with what Tolkien talks about, works never being repeated, and kind of like a child's model of something that was greater. It's tried to repeat that magic with The Hobbit, and they failed miserably with that. if I do say so.
I think on occasion, though, like when you compare The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, The Lord of the Rings was comfortable being its own thing, while The Hobbit tried to mimic it. And this is something you also kind of see in the series at times. Like there was a bit when Theo asks Bronwyn to say to tell him that thing she used to tell him when he was young. And to me, it was a massive throwback to Sam's speech in Osgiliath with Frodo. And it just seemed really artificial to me. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't see a kid going up to his mom telling him, "Could you repeat that?" Which I remember. It seemed like really forced.
A lot of that.
They're trying to mimic that magic or that moving element, and it's at the same time you get that slow motion of the villagers, which is similar to Helm's Deep when Theoden is giving his speech. It's like they're drawing aspirations from something which is extremely successful, but rather than giving it their own twist, it's mimicry, and it falls flat. It feels really artificial.
I have to say it's one of my biggest pet peeves with these things. It's the same with anything. Like I like all the video games kind of set in Middle Earth and that, but they're all guilty of it as well. There's this constant fan service and callback to the Peter Jackson movies. They'll throw in lines that characters said, and everything you just said there, I completely agree with. It's Sam's speech, Helm's Deep, and we don't need to see it again. Well, we can see it in Lord of the Rings. Do your own thing, and it just, like you said, it's artificial, it's forced, and I keep noticing these like characters saying, "What is this devilry?" and that kind of thing, and I'm like, "Oh, I remember Boromir saying that," and it's like, why do you keep doing that? Just write your own dialogue and write your own story here. And it's noticeable if you've watched the films a lot of times, if you've read Tolkien a lot of times, but especially those films, they're kind of relying on them a lot and reusing stuff, and it's weak, I think.
And again, a bit of a callback, and that's probably why from my end I really enjoyed the whole Elrond Thorin interactions, because you had heartfelt moments which felt very original. There were things which they brought like a sweet perspective, the aging of the elves and dwarves, the way they view the passage of time, the hurdles it might cause in a friendship, and it just felt really, really heartfelt. Like, to me, that was like my favorite moment in the series, Elrond and Thorin going up in the lift and speaking to each other. So they do have the capacity to create these moments. It's clear. I just don't get why they're so inconsistent in it and the way they deliver it.
Yeah, they're relying on it too much. It's this. There's these things I keep noticing as well, where they're wanting to have like their own designs. Like the elves will look a certain way just for the Rings of Power, but when they show a Balrog, it's Peter Jackson's Balrog, and I'm just like, make your mind up. Are you wanting to do your own thing, which I would fully support? Peter Jackson doesn't own Middle Earth. Put your own designs and put your own ideas out there, but don't pick at it and try and have your cake and eat it too. It's I think it's quite lazy, and it's kind of pandering to obviously what was a great achievement with the films, and they're trying to repeat it in that way, and I don't think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, it's just like in early interviews they said they want to do their own thing. They want to be very different from Peter Jackson, and in a way they are very different from what Peter Jackson did, and in many areas. But in some areas they're also too close to it. Like as you said, the Balrog is a perfect example. They had the chance to maybe create like a new version that looks different, and but it feels like it's the same Balrog, basically, Balrog design again. We have this classic Rohan Riders shot that we have in episode 6 that you think, okay, it's probably only in the show because Peter Jackson did it, and people should get this Peter Jackson Rohan scene moment again, and so
their helmets as well. That's, I really didn't like that. That's really, really weak, to be honest. And just like you're saying, it's they're relying on the Peter Jackson movies while still making out that they're doing their own thing. But it's really weird as well that the stuff they're taking from Peter Jackson is actually as if it's like pulling the show down. If they trusted themselves and actually went for it, who knows what it could have been. But I don't know how other people feel about it, but when they keep referencing the Peter Jackson movies, I've not enjoyed any of it yet. It's not what I look for. This fan service callback stuff. It's just something I've never liked. And a lot of shows and movies do that, and it's never worked for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think because the amount of people you want to reach is just so wide, and you're probably also looking for new people, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That you maybe want to make this. I'm not a marketing guy, so I've not a good answer to that. But yeah, for me, it's also, I would prefer if they would try something completely new. And in ways, they tried, for example, with the whole elven designs, with the laurels and so on. It's definitely different from what Peter Jackson designs in his film. So, of course, some stuff is simply described in the books or so it kind of makes sense that it maybe is similar. But yeah, sometimes they definitely... It's too on the face at times, especially in episode 6. I felt like the amount of Peter Jackson references was increased massively in this episode, like compared to the previous ones. Like, I don't know, watching this, you notice like at least 10, 15, 20 references or so in this. It's almost like ridiculous. It's really, really a lot of that in this particular episode. Maybe because the director changed. It's now Charlotte Brännström, I think is her name pronounced. And maybe she's a massive fan and wants to play like homage to Peter Jackson as her first directed episode or so. Maybe it will cool down the next few episodes again, the next two.
It's still the writers, isn't it? The writers are consistent across it, so the references seem to be built into a lot of the references seem to be built into the script as well, not just the
that's true.
Production. But you also have to, like you say, it's a big expensive TV show. We're not producers or anything. I guarantee there's a group of suits in a boardroom saying, you have to do this. You have to add, you have to make Halbrand look like Aragorn. They did it with Thorin in the Hobbit films. He tried to make him look as much like Aragorn as they could, even though he's a dwarf. It's like there's these people that make these decisions to get these people who they're not as into Tolkien as everybody that's sitting here talking about it and in the stream, in the chat, trying to get the general audience to get drawn in and watch it as well. That there's far more people out there that don't care about Tolkien who could watch this than people who do care about him who could watch it. So they're the ones that matter to Amazon.
Yeah, for sure.
It's cynical, but that's true.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's like every fandom kind of needs fresh meat. I almost said like new people simply to join, else it gets too old or whatever. It's kind of cool when new people can also enjoy this and maybe even start reading the Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, or so on. That's definitely, my opinion. Always like good if they do. Probably they will be shocked after reading those books, but
yeah. Where's Halbrand? What's going on here? Where's Disa? They're not going to find these characters, but I'm not like elitist gatekeeper or anything. It's if this show has introduced more people to reading Tolkien, that's the best thing about it.
Yeah, exactly. It also helps keeping things positive. Yeah, I'm not sure because we're relatively late already into the stream, so I would suggest we maybe if on the way to Galadriel and Adar talking to each other, because I think that we should definitely discuss for a moment. Is there any other scene you maybe want to discuss on the way?
Well, should be discussed. We're kind of building up to the Galadriel Adar because we've probably got the most to say about it, but the scene after it. Are we going to talk about that last since it's the final scene?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the next big one I think we would talk about.
There is I'm seeing some of the comments. They're asking us to discuss something positive, and from my end, there's something I really liked about the whole Numenorian battle. The way like Isildur reacts to when Elendil is on the ground. Like if they end up using it as a sort of throwback to Elendil's battle with Sauron, when Isildur goes towards his father's body, but this time rather than finding him safe, he's dead. It can be quite a powerful moment. Like when I saw it, it kind of reminded me of that future scene, I suppose.
That's exactly what I thought when I saw that. I thought that they're going to repeat that. It's. I think you're spot on there. I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Like they build up that, even though like in this show they have like a particular stressed relationship at times. It definitely shows that they definitely care. I even feel like in this episode in particular, Isildur, I understood this character suddenly a lot better than in all the previous episodes, where it never really worked, with some also strange decisions in this regard. So I can definitely, I definitely like Isildur also a lot more in this episode. I feel like most characters made a lot more sense in this one here, so that's probably why I'm also more positive towards episode 6. And
Isildur was a lot better, yeah.
Before he felt a bit like Isildur felt a bit, he was not developed enough as a character in the show yet, and so I couldn't really feel with him or understand what are his troubles exactly. And I feel like we now got a slight glimpse at where this trouble might has its root, and that kind of helped him in the show, I feel like, a lot, and very interesting to see what he does next.
And there's also, Chris, one other thing I'd like to bring up, but it's more of a throwaway comment rather than something which there's much to discuss about. But I think like Aaron there, he really needs to work on his hiding skills. Because when he took that sword, I was sure he's going to bury it somewhere like far off, and like hiding it under the floorboards of the tavern didn't seem like the smartest place. It seemed quite like, hey, I don't know.
That is kind of true. Like I mean, in some previous episodes, there was always this: we do stuff off screen, and you have to basically guess how it came to the situation. Now, like how the guards or how the people of the watchtower got captured, the elves, stuff like that. I also didn't like. In this episode, at least, they very often hint at how stuff works. Like even in the scene where, as I said, Arondir hide the sword in the tavern. We've seen the background Theo looking where he's going, so you can make this connection. I felt like this worked a lot better in this episode, and I don't know. There's also the scene with Bronwyn and Arondir, and there we got the seed explained. Also, like that, I have to admit, they mentioned it before. I assume he can't name Yavanna by name because of rights reasons, which is very unfortunate, I feel. But I mean, at least implies there is.
They're mentioned Aule a few times, and have they not mentioned? Have they mentioned Manwë, or am I making that up?
Manwë as well, yeah.
Why wouldn't they be able to mention Yavanna? I noticed that they didn't mention her by name, but it's maybe as if like he doesn't know the name or something like that.
I mean, it would be possible.
But it's strange if they could mention some of the Valar, not other figures.
I mean, Aule is mentioned in Lord of the Rings, and they have the rights to that. Yavanna is only mentioned like in a man's name. Manwë, I'm actually not even sure if he's mentioned in Lord of the Rings.
Something with eagles, I suppose, like the heralds of Manwë or something like that.
Yeah, it could be mentioned. So maybe it's simply down to that. I mean, they also mention what's it called, Armenilos, and that is not mentioned in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. So they maybe have some additional rights, but probably not for all the stuff. One of these parts where I would say it's a bit unfortunate that it's like that. Okay, Manwë is mentioned. Elder King in the index, it says in brackets Manwë, so it's at least mentioned in the index at the end. So they had to really dig to get that name.
Strange that it just comes down to that, doesn't it? It's like maybe they can mention Manwë just because that name is mentioned once in an index or something. It's just so weird, this whole rights thing with the show. I think
it's really strange, and it's kind of unfortunate. I feel like especially in episode 1, I felt like, okay, they probably would have mentioned a lot more and named a few more things there in the prologue, but I assume they simply couldn't because rights issues. It felt a bit like it limits them at times, which is, in my opinion, unfortunate.
I think I tweeted, or was that? I hate saying tweeted, but I think I mentioned it somewhere where I was expecting the big Morgoth reveal. They were like building it, and then it's as if they can't really go into detail about maybe the War of Wrath or something like that. And then it just cut to like Galadriel saying Morgoth was defeated, and then it's just like we move on. And I'm like, oh, okay, the most exciting part we were building up to, you can't tell us anything about it. It's like you just got that shadow at the trees, and don't worry, Morgoth was defeated, and now we're in the Second Age. And that's the rights getting in the way, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, beyond that, the overall battle I found okay. Maybe I should ask, because I find that is an interesting question, in a way. How did you like the Galadriel neo-dodge?
Oh.
I have to admit, I'm probably one of the few who kind of liked it, I have to admit. I found it was a fun scene, but of course it was completely exaggerated, when I can see why people hate it, but I kind of found it funny.
We kind of saw Legolas skateboard, on a shield and on the Mumakil trunk, so I have no problem with elven acrobatics at this point. It's, I'm down with it. It's fine.
I thought it was quite funny. Again, it's the acrobatics not as fine. It's not as bad as the shield surfing, but I think I was on board with it because it's actually quite a cool shot of her riding like that, and then I think she like beheads an orc, and the head flies up really high, and I thought that was really funny. So I'm kind of on board with it because she pulled off that move. And I'm someone who a lot of people seem to hate that moment in the I think it's the Two Towers where Legolas kind of does that acrobatic move onto the horse, and I always thought I just always thought it looked really cool. So I don't mind this so much, and they're obviously doing that thing where they're showing that she's different from everyone else that's fighting, basically, which is they keep showing how different Galadriel is, and I don't have a major problem with that, especially with the beheading. That's what I like to see.
Yeah, I have to admit, I also kind of liked it. Like, I appreciate, like, it's a stunt. It's not like CGI or anything. It's really the actress, the stunt double, I assume, is really doing a move like this. Maybe she did it herself. I'm not sure. I think it's not her face though. If you look closely, but I don't know.
Have insurance for her to do that. I think it'd be a stunt.
It's kind of it's impressive though. And she also is wearing this armor. Maybe it had some modification that it is more flexible to make this stunt possible or so. I don't know. But I have to admit, I did not find this worse than somebody wrote in chat. I found it worse than Legolas shield sliding, shooting arrows while doing so. I have to admit, I don't agree with that.
I think it's obviously just all show. It's all flash. It's would Galadriel actually do this? Would that be the best move to do in that moment? Yeah. It's just a moment for the show and the battle, isn't it? I wouldn't overthink it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And she it was also like, I don't know, it's like I said, it's a practical stunt. Not, and I guess the orc kind of, if you look very closely frame by frame, you notice that the orc maybe aims for the head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here in this shot's probably really hard to see. Now I have to go into deep trickery of production, but here you see the arrow. So she just decides, I'm out of here, and just leaves. I don't know. I kind of have to admit, I kind of like the scene. I know people hate it at times, but I found it a really fun scene.
How do you guys feel about the stakes of the battle? Like, would you have found it satisfying with the way they portrayed it, I suppose?
I mean, in a way, the stakes are always, when Galadriel is involved, a little bit low for her. because we know she will survive, and Elendil and Isildur also will survive. It's basically always the curse of the prequel, if that makes sense. And but I felt like Bronwyn could actually die there. Maybe I was a bit naive with this, but I could have, like, so far the character does not seem so important for the show, and maybe it is like a major shift in character development for Arondir then later. So I could have imagined maybe she dies there in this scene. So for that part, somebody earlier wrote in chat that he often feels like there are no stakes, and I can completely see that. But at least for the new characters, I feel like they could definitely die here and there. So
even like for me, Bronwyn and even Isildur's friends, I would have been okay if one of them died. I think it helps to improve the stakes. Or if Arondir or one of the main characters who again were created for the series kind of loses an arm or something, it kind of adds to the realism. And that's something, again, maybe we're spoiled from Game of Thrones, but I wish we see more of it in the series. Kind of, you actually feel tense for the characters rather than just, oh, this is a cool scene, let's move on. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of my attitude for this battle. I wasn't really tense or anything, you know? It's like, you know what's going to happen.
I think I'll comment on two things. For the Bronwyn thing first, I think it's far too early in that romance for them to kill her off, even though that would have been a surprise. I think it'll be later probably, and hopefully if they're going to do that, it will be some comment about mortality and immortality with elves and men or something, so it might happen quite far into the series. But the stakes, I think it's the curse of it being a TV show. So it seemed very small in scale. You've got the Númenóreans arriving with, the Regent and Galadriel and Elendil and Isildur, all these figures that when you read Tolkien are, most of those figures are, heroes among heroes and all this, and they're arriving at this little village in the Southlands, and there's a little battle, and they crown a king in this little village, and it's really, really small in scale. And you can just tell that if this was a movie, that battle would have been huge, and it would have went on longer. And they're not doing that because it's obviously a TV show. So I thought that was very strange with the stakes and the scale of it. It's just, especially when they started saying, "Oh, this is your king," and then there's like 30 people standing around, and I was like, that's really weird. Like, if you just know that if it was a movie, there'd be 10,000 people standing there like cheering him on and that, and it's just because it's a TV show. I think that's so it just makes everything feel smaller.
Yeah.
Also, a TV show filmed during COVID, you have to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we got that with Council of the Rings and his multiple extras. That image that was posted and everyone's raging about it. I have to remember it's filmed in COVID as well, so scale's going to be smaller anyway.
I think like during the whole, let's say the battle scene, the only point I actually felt tense was when Galadriel was chasing Adar and Halbrand is approaching from the opposite direction. Like that was a moment where I actually was kind of not confused or unsure. Is he going to go for Galadriel? Is this going to be like a reveal that he's evil, or is he? Like, that was a cool moment. Like those type of build-ups are intriguing. Like that was top notch from their end.
They could have subverted our expectations and beheaded Galadriel in that moment or something.
But like, I was honestly unsure. He could go for either or. The way they built up his character, it's like that was the only point, though. I think that I was kind of tense throughout the entire scene.
Yeah,
which is probably would you agree that's a bad thing? If that, I agree with you, that's quite a tense moment in that. But if that was the only moment you were kind of on the edge of your seat, is that you saying that the battle was just inconsequential to you when you were watching
it? Because for me, so far, I just feel nobody significant is harmed in a slight way. Like, sure, she got shot with 2 arrows, but she's fine. If she died, or maybe if in the next episodes they kind of go with the orc arrows being poisoned and she ends up, I'd respect it. I just think it is important to keep an audience on edge, to show that your characters aren't safe.
Everyone's safe until like the second
Yeah.
season or something, where just it's still like an introduction or something like that. It's not Game of Thrones with Ned Stark, where I hadn't read that first book at that time, but I was genuinely thinking, well, he's not gonna get executed. He's the main guy, and been really, really surprised when he died. Spoiler alert for anyone in the chat, but there's been nothing like that. And I'm not wanting this to be Game of Thrones, but you're making a good point where we're just kind of going along with the story, waiting for the stakes to be increased, it seems like.
I think it was one of the things which made Game of Thrones very interesting. And again, not to avoid spoilers, but let's say like in Game of Thrones, there's that particular battle where someone's physically mutilated in the Battle of the Bywater. We could have had something like that in these sort of scenes. You don't have to kill off the character, but injure them if need be. Show that there is a loss of some sort, rather than just people who are inconsequential to the rest of the story.
It's maybe.
Especially- yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because they've created so many new characters that these are the type of characters they can actually use for this purpose. And I don't see there being another massive battle in the next 2 episodes. They have to rush things, in my opinion, to be able to fit in, either something with Sauron or the Numenoreans. I just can't see there being another big occasion to. Maybe they managed. Like, that would be awesome, but I was a bit let down with the stakes.
I think you're making a good point with the kind of invented characters. That's their chance to be creative with them, because I'm not spoiling it. I don't know if anyone in the chat doesn't know what happens to the likes of Galadriel, Elendil, Isildur, and all these like real Tolkien characters. But if you do know what happens to them, then Elrond and Celebrimbor, all these figures, the stakes, there are no real stakes, are there? You're just kind of, for however many seasons that all these main characters are going to be fine, and some of them are going to be fine throughout the whole thing. So they have to be creative with made up characters, and even we're only 6 episodes in, but everyone's safe and sound, and we're just kind of plodding along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shall we move to the Adar, Halbrand, Galadriel stuff now?
Yeah,
because we're far into the show. Maybe we have like 20. I'm not sure how much time you have, but officially like 10, 15, 20 minutes left. So I would definitely start going there a little bit. I have to say, here for me it starts to get really interesting. Like we see Halbrand, he basically knew where he was going. Like the intention of Adar often gets this writing scene discussed. It was like to lure every attention as far away from Waldrick as possible, who he said, I have a favor to ask and you have to do something for me or something like that. And from that point, I knew, okay, he was getting the sword, and he brings it to the watchtower. Also, we will discuss this in a moment. But and then he basically Galadriel is chasing Adar, and I assume because Halbrand knows the region, he just is able to intercept him in a way. And some people, I don't know why people got so upset about this interception. Some felt, it's so completely unrealistic, but I feel like if he knows where he's going, and it's kind of like, not a dead end, but you could make an argument that he can find. I mean, it's a film trope, don't get me wrong, but for me it kind of worked. And Galadriel has to hold him back. And it already starts here with the whole, do you remember me? And he says, no. And he's just listing all the bad stuff he was doing. Oh, Cluth Fangol is in chat, welcome. Also shouts to Rosie, also in chat. Basically, you list all the bad stuff. Did I kill your wife, your children, like kind of like that? And he seems to not know. And some people maybe say, maybe Halbrand looked different back in the day or whatever. That's interesting. It's an interesting theory, but then he is captured, and they bring him into the barn. And let me just see where the scene is. Yeah, here it is, and they have this, in my opinion, absolutely fantastic dialogue scene here, where we learn quite a lot about Galadriel, we learn quite a lot about Adar, get some background information here and there, and it's also filmed in the so-called Dutch angle. Mm-hmm. So, like, the camera is always tilted a little bit, like, by, what is it, 45, a bit less than 45 degrees here in this particular shot, and this makes the build more, the image more, it's not really, what is the word for in English, unresting? No, you know what I mean?
Easy feeling you're supposed to get from
an uneasy feeling you get from that, for example. And it also can mess with some other stuff, like perception of who's taller than the other person and so on. It's can elevate stuff like that. It's a really interesting choice here, which I found really interestingly filmed. And ironically, I assume this is in particular the same barn where the black sword was found initially by Theo. So maybe 70 degrees. And it's kind of a very interesting scene. So I don't want to take away too much from your talking time. So feel free to maybe share your thoughts here on this.
Well, I think we'll all have a lot to say about it, but this is the scene where I was kind of genuinely surprised at kind of some of the material they were throwing out. I think it's maybe a bit on the nose with Adar mentioning like the secret fire. I think it's maybe not so secret if Adar can speak about it, but even just mentioning that, and then other things he's hinting at with they're obviously going with the Silmarillion creation of orcs story, and it was a moment where it's not battles or spectacle or anything like that. It was just two characters talking, and I think, like I say, genuinely surprised at some of this material, which really felt to me like material you'd find in History of Middle-earth or Tolkien's letters or something like that. It wasn't just they're scrambling to find something in the appendices. It was surprisingly deep discussion at this point in the show. So I liked this scene, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with Steve, and it's also super scene. What I really enjoyed was also when Adar was kind of discussing that Sauron, wanted to create a perfect world with order. I found it a really cool reference, because we don't really get to see that part of Sauron in the trilogy, and it's actually canon. So it was cool for them to mention it. Yeah, but I think my thoughts are exactly like Steven's on everything. It's a great scene.
That's like History of Middle-earth. No, I don't know anything about the rights with that, right? But that's like stuff you would read in notes on motives in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, I think
I love quoting in videos all the time. It's one of my favorite essays, and it's just when he started mentioning Sauron and Perfect World, and that, it's like, yeah, that's exactly Sauron. He's not just a evil Dark Lord that wants to rule everyone just because. It's inheriting the corruption of Morgoth, having good motives, and then been drawn back into evil through the power he holds and the what he can do with his rings of power and all that. It was just really surprising that they actually spoke about Sauron like that, and not just he's evil and we need to defeat him. It was giving depth to that unseen character. So I'd say it's one of the best moments in the show so far for me.
Yeah, I also found it's interesting that Adar kind of hinted at Sauron's motive, that he's trying to create the ring. That he says that he journeyed north and he was trying to harness the unseen power. And I'm interested to see where they go about with it. Like what he was trying to forge, why did he fail, and what will Celebrimbor have, which allows him to succeed at the end of the day. And I guess this ties in with that sword, since Theo says that it was like not calling out to him, but he had trouble letting it go, that he felt that it was missing. So perhaps that was one of these early artifacts that Sauron was trying to create to mimic the ring's effects, which didn't fulfill their full objective. But I just think again, it's there's intrigue there, and it's really cool to explore it further. Like I'm quite interested to see where they go about with it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
with sorry, Chris, just with Sauron, he's one that since before the show was made, I was really, really hoping they would get Sauron right, and I'm not wanting, if they can use Anatar, if they can use like a fair form Sauron, I'm hoping he's not obviously evil, like evil eyes, breaking the fourth wall, looking at the camera and all that kind of stuff. I'm hoping they can really give depth to the figure that obviously in the Lord of the Rings we don't get to see. And if they're creating all this stuff for the second age show, it's a really, really good opportunity, to give him he's due, make him as interesting as I really think he is. Why I make so many videos about him. He's a deeper character than you would expect from the Lord of the Rings, and they've got a chance to do that if they can do it right. But I don't know where they'll take it, but I think this kind of moment was a good start.
Yeah, I really hope though they keep Adar alive for at least like a few more. I'd like to see more of him. Like I hope he doesn't get killed off, because out of all the original characters, I don't feel anyone comes close to his level of intrigue or even the portrayal, the nuance he brings to the lore. I suppose. Sure, it is a bit lore breaking in certain aspects, but it's very cool. Like he's probably one of my favorite characters, which is quite it's quite good considering he's an original one for the series. It's credit to them.
It's kind of strange. Like I think that's partly because these characters that are established, what we know about, none of them really seem like their book counterpart. But everyone seems to say that the Arondir and Adar are the most interesting characters.
Mm-hmm.
They're the invented characters. So it's kind of a compliment, but it's also a backhanded compliment because it's as if they're not getting the Tolkien characters right.
Yeah.
But I'll give them their due. I don't want to put a negative in a positive. I think Adar is definitely the most interesting and intriguing character on the show so far for me.
To be honest, I'm also quite hyped to see what they do with Halbrand. Like, so far I feel throughout the series, the amount of speculation, at least I had, which turned out to be wrong. Like they kind of trick you into a false expectation, be it the Meteor Man or Adar. So if Halbrand turns out not to be Sauron, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if he ends up, the king of the of the White Mountains, when the Oathbreakers, and if they kind of find a way to twist it to that storyline, it would be interesting. I just feel they're dropping so many hints that he's Sauron that we're gonna get kind of rug pulled and the subvert our expectations, and I'd like it. Like it's happened so often so far that I'm really cautious towards saying, okay, he's definitely Sauron.
Yeah.
It could be a ringwraith or anything. You never, or he could just actually be a hero of men who die or something like that. It could be anything, but it's this kind of mystery box thing they're doing. It's like it seems so obvious that he could be Sauron. If he ends up being Sauron, it's like disappointing.
Yeah,
but it wouldn't be a surprise if he does become Sauron. It's kind of strange.
The only thing I'd find really odd though is if Sauron didn't appear so far in 6 episodes. Like if they just introduce him in the 7th or 8th, it seems so late in the series that that's the main point, which kind of then makes me more convinced that Halbrand will actually turn out to be Sauron. But if the season was longer, say 14 episodes, I'd really be on the fence, like on it. I still am, but it's kind of pushing me a bit more towards the whole Sauron Halbrand theory.
Personally, I think it isn't Sauron. I just think Sauron's going to be the final shot of the season. That's what I think. I think it'd be weird to introduce him in the 7th episode. It's just a really weird episode to choose, the penultimate episode of a season. But I think there's going to be some reveal in a Region or something like that where you'll see like Anatar or something, and you're going to go, oh, there's Sauron, and then the season will end. That's honestly what I think. It will be either kind of a dark Sauron, or it'll be fair form Sauron, and I think that'll be the final shot of the season. But I could be completely wrong, of course.
Yeah, but then
Probably
like
will be.
what's really interesting is the whole Halbrand Adar interaction. It's almost clear that whatever Adar did to Halbrand is way worse than killing his family, his village. And that's kind of leads me to the question of what else could it be? What could be worse than that? It's like, I don't know what your thoughts on it. Like, what if you have any theories for what he might have done to him?
Oh,
Not really a good one.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. If you've got a
Unfortunately,
theory,
like,
Chris, you can share it.
No,
I
that's
honestly
why I'm
don't.
like, I'm completely oblivious. And this is where, again, I'm like, are they actually going to make him Sauron? Because I was wondering, again, this is where maybe, Halbrand keeps mentioning about his past and everything. What if Adar kind of recruits Halbrand? Halbrand then betrays his village to worship Sauron. And this is kind of linking to the Oathbreakers, why that they used to worship Sauron, that they had a certain loyalty to him. Like that's maybe one link they could forge, but is it severe enough? Is the severity as significant as the one they're implying?
yeah, it's pretty hard to tell. Like, there could be all kind of things. Maybe he really had like a family, and I don't know, something happened to them due to him. Maybe because Adar also drops like that he killed Sauron or cut him open, split him open. I'm not sure how he worded it, but something like that. And yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting in a way as well. Like they added a lot of mystery with this dialogue, in particular, because it just feels like, okay, what is going on with this character? What is what's the background of that? What is the problem? It's really fascinating to me to see this, because it could go anywhere. Like, especially after the Mount Doom breaks out, like it's almost like a cloud is also on my vision. Like I can't really foresee what is now happening when after the breakout exactly. Like where are they going? And it's kind of cool, even for even as a somebody who knows the books quite well, because it's not like, okay, now this is gonna happen, now this is gonna. They really made this kind of interesting, and especially with this scene here in the barn, and it was a really good introduction into this, because it just opened so many other questions now that I have in my head, and they did it in a good way. That's, I think, the most positive. I think it's easy to make you question a lot of things, but here I feel like they really did it in a good way. They definitely showed that they understood the Sauron to some degree, it seems, as we discussed at the beginning, at least his basic motives, and then they also now managed to establish Galadriel's inner evil a little bit as well. Like it's kind of fascinating, and I read this in previous analysis stream as well, but I can read this again from Morgoth's Ring. There is like a section where Tolkien describes how orcs should be treated in case they are captured. They must be fought with utmost severity. They must not be dealt with their own terms of cruelty and treachery. Captives must not be tormented, not even to discover information for defense of the homes of elves and men. If any orc surrendered and asked for mercy, they must be granted it, even at a cost. And that is, like Tolkien also states, this was a teaching of the wise, though in the horror of the war, it was not always heeded. So it's a very interesting little section about this, like how the wise think elves should behave and treat prisoners, especially the orcs, and especially the line "even at a cost." And Galadriel is completely overboard with that, and Adar really says this to her. Maybe you also got transformed by Morgoth, if that makes sense. And that was, I guess, one of my favorite lines of this whole conversation. And it also feels like with Adar, she found finally somebody who meets her who's potentially better than her in a way. Like usually Galadriel, even though she acts very strangely and undiplomatic, she always is in control and she always pushes, what she wants to do. In this scene, I feel like she found an opponent that is a match for her, like that definitely pushed her. You see it at the end where she wants to kill him, and this time Halbrand has to hold her back because she kind of lost this verbal battle in a way, and got provoked so much that she lost it because there's so much evil and anger in her that she simply lost it there for a moment, and it's interesting. I feel to see, and that's why I like this scene, and it's my opinion, done pretty well in a way. It's highly fascinating to see this. How this turned out then at the end. There are so many cool little themes in this, and as you said, where will they go from here? What happened to Sauron? Will we learn it is, I don't know, like you can spin all kinds of crazy theories that maybe Sauron split into a different being. I like the theory that maybe Sauron made Adar think he killed Sauron, and in truth, he's now working for Sauron without even knowing it, because that would be, in my opinion, kind of Sauron style, if you know what I mean. It's like thinking you're doing the right thing, and then he traps you. You want to say something, Stephen?
Oh, just what you were saying there. Like, it seems more like Sauron, and that's the Sauron I see as well. The cunning Sauron. It's less about battlefield swinging a mace. It's more working in the background, getting his own way through corruption and his mind. So maybe he's made Adar think he's done something that he hasn't, and he's still working for him. But Adar might have his own motives here, where he's just he's saying to Galadriel, who's so desperate to take out Sauron, that you're too late. I've already managed it, and she still wants her vengeance. There's a lot that it could be. So we don't really know until maybe the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, sorry, Chris.
Also, yeah,
no,
I just want to agree, but continue.
No, just a small tie-in regarding the whole again Sauron Halbrand thing. If it does turn out to be Sauron, I think for Galadriel's own character development, it would be a really cool turning point, considering she had such an uncontrollable, I wouldn't say irrational, but blinding hate towards Sauron, that the realization that it was a companion that she did grow to care about, maybe that use that as the moment that she kind of tones down the the current path that her character is on, that kind of hell-bent vengeance, where it'd be very humbling, I think, for her. Again, it's just branching again back to what we were discussing before, Chris.
Yeah, it's really a really cool scene. I really like maybe to slowly get we wanted to talk about the outbreak of Mount Doom as well. To maybe slowly lead into that. I really also liked in a way. I found this really elegant, because Galadriel has this, as I mentioned a moment before, like she goes basically against everything the elves kind of believe in, at least the wise of the elves, and she's just full. I want to destroy you and the orcs and Sauron and everything, and then basically wipe the evil from the earth. And I feel that is, though it's unfortunate, Galadriel is the character who has to learn this lesson, because we would think she would be wiser after the first age, but here we are. And though I find this in of itself a very interesting thought, that I assume they try to portray here in this episode that Galadriel thinks maybe that when she kills all the orcs and Adar last and Sauron or whoever's left, that then she has basically removed evil from Earth and there will be peace. And though she says that at the beginning that evil is never gone, it always lingers or something like that. But I think she underestimates the powers she's dealing here with her. And I think the moment, and now we come slowly to the outbreak. The moment, let me just see if I find the right scene, because here I have quite a few of them. At the moment she basically sees Mount Doom breaking out and sees what is happening there, she realizes, like, okay, Sauron is not here yet. I have Adar here in my barn as a captive, and even though I defeated the orcs, I have them in my power, I can kill them or whatever, there's still this old evil in the form of Mount Doom that Morgoth in the First Age, I assume, sometimes at some point created in Mordor. And it's like a relic of old, and Morgoth was thrown into the void like maybe 1,000 years ago or something. So he should be out of the equation already, but he is not. It's not Sauron causing her trouble here. It's causing basically some relics of Morgoth, and this, like from 1 second to another, completely flips everything she has fought for in this episode, like in just a moment, in a way. It's just, I find this a really interesting idea, basically what she says, and I think she has to learn the lesson that you can't just kill all the orcs and so on, and then evil is gone from the equation. Like Ada also mentioned something like this in episode 3, I think, or 4, where he basically says that you were told many lies and that the world has to be created anew. He probably means this in a very different sense than we think of. But of course, we also know about the concept of Arda Mad and Arda Healed. And for Arda Healed to be there, you have to undo Arda Mad. So you have to destroy the world and create it anew. Else the power of Morgoth will always be in the world. And I find this, like, from this perspective, and this turning then basically this green place here into this hellish landscape, we know from for example the Peter Jackson films or the books. It's in just 1 second it just shows, and I really like just like, besides it looking really cool at times, here in all these shots, I really like the how Galadriel at the very end kind of looks into this explosion and she has this PTSD look, this 1,000 yards stare almost, like. And in this context, I found this was a really powerful scene, so which I liked a lot. But now I maybe talked too much already about the scene. What are your thoughts on the last part, on the turning of Mordor into before Mordor to turning to Mordor, if that makes sense?
I agree with you, Chris, that like visually it's they did a great job at it, even the whole cataclysmic and Galadriel's reaction. What I didn't like was the way the transformation occurred. It's kind of that after inserting the sword, rather than it having a magical effect, which I would have been down with, it's like, the rocks kind of crumble. And from the way I was saying it, did they actually need the sword to do that? Couldn't they just kind of mine the rock and the water would gush out anyway? Like, I wish maybe there was some more like dark magic involved that started it, the whole catalyst behind it all. That's my main issue with it. I do like the throwback to the tunnels. I feel it was a cool build-up personally. But yeah, that's the only. Again, I love the scene, but that's the only part which which didn't make too much sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. The payoff of the sword hilt was also for me a letdown. I feel like everything would have worked much better if they simply I don't know, did this a bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that,
like with black magic, with black sorcery, dark spells. I don't know. Sorry, Steve?
Oh, the whole sword thing feels very like Indiana Jones or something. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's this hidden key and you put this in, and like the hidden lock, you put this key in, and it's like a chain reaction. I was like, I expected something a bit different from Sauron doing it. he went to Mordor because Rodoreen was already there, and it's like you were explaining, a remnant of Morgoth. He went there for his sorceries. He's forging the subterranean fire that was already there, and Sauron, I don't think he would need to do it this way. It just seems weirdly over the top for. I know we were kind of around saying, oh, it'd been better if he had achieved it through what we're calling magic, which seems like a cop out. But for someone like Sauron, I thought he would go to Mordor, to Rodoreen, and awaken it, and we can still have this moment where the power of Mount Doom is kind of unleashed on the world because of Sauron. And I just think it could have been achieved without the kind of gimmicky mechanism through some key. It just I didn't like that part at all. But like we're saying, the visuals were great, of course. I like that we saw Mount Doom erupting, and I just think that's the weakest part. That whole, the hilt being this key, and it could. I would have rather have just had Sauron going in there and kind of willing it to happen or something like that. Just like you putting his power into the world and achieving it through the strength of his will, rather than I'm going to spend this amount of time creating this mechanism to have it happen. It's a strange choice, but if people did like it, I can still see why. But personally, I would have went a different route for Sauron awakening the mountain.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, you're right, Stephen. It's a great point, because he kind of created his own. Sauron kind of created the hurdle in his own plan. Like, he could have completely bypassed this and used it directly, at that time. And thinking about it, like, at first, it's something. Now that you mention it, I'm more aware of it. Before, it's something I completely overlooked, but it's kind of dumb on his part.
Yeah, like this whole sword. I mean, I could imagine that there's still more when it comes to this sword, because Theo says he kind of he feels lost not having it, so it has kind of an influence on him, which also makes it maybe him giving the sword to Arondi a very strong move by his side. Like, it's a very interesting move just from a character perspective, but still, that then in the show so far, from the perspective of episode 6. It's just basically a key that activates, like I used the exact same phrasing as Stephen here, like an Indiana Jones mechanism that just pulls down some rock and then some water starts flowing. Like, couldn't Adar just dig to another river, which we on some of the maps see plenty of? Like, why use this mechanism? Couldn't the orcs just, I don't know, destroy the dam? Like, what and I'm just speechless by this, even though it makes the trenches kind of work, I feel, but it still for me is like in a very, like, it's a stretch, simply, in my opinion. And I would have just preferred if he would just, I don't know, has to make like a blood sacrifice and whatnot, and then I don't know how they visualize this, but it's really, for me, really strange. And especially a lot of people consistently also complain about the heat that the volcano's explosion would include, and would probably kill all the people, which is of course true. But I feel if they would have done it with a more magical route, if you want to call it like this in Tolkien's universe, then you could definitely have established that, yeah, it's not there to burn everything, it's there to transform basically this land, the Southlands, into Udun, which means underworld or hell, if you want. Tolkien gives the translation, the index of, or at least mentioned in the index of the Lord of the Rings. So it's a transformation of the land. It's not necessary to burn everything. It's just to change the land as a whole to a place where the evil of Morgoth and Sauron can linger and dwell in. And that is the important part of this. And tying this to like a physical effect, like with pouring water into a volcano to make to force like a reaction, that it just circumvents this idea a little bit. I feel like I would have here also preferred much more that they would have went for like a magical, that makes sense, route for it to make more sense, and for maybe to also show, okay, there's some power in this sword that has to be used, and that is why you can only do this with this particular sword and so on. Or maybe I don't know, but as you said, it's in a way also stupid. Like, what if the sword is gone, then Sauron loses control over the over Mount Doom or something? It's a really strange mechanism, but the way they portrayed it, I felt it was really really disappointing, like really underwhelmed by seeing what they did there. Like, I feel like the whole payoff was not worth it just from this perspective, especially if you would imagine. Oh, sorry.
No, I thought you had finished your point.
Yeah, basically.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but it's just when you're talking about magic, and it's almost like this could be a blessing in disguise, though, because I don't know if they can maybe handle magic. It's very subtle in Tolkien's works, as you know, so it's almost as if we're saying, I wish Sauron had performed this through magic, I would have hated to have seen him perform some weird kind of spell or something like that, and it's like a really generic fantasy magic, which is not how I imagine Sauron would actually perform these feats of power or anything like that. So I don't know how they would actually show it through this magic, even though I'd rather have seen it. I think they would maybe have not handled it because they might not understand that it's not about firing lightning bolts from your fingers or anything like that. It's like magic's really subtle, but it's something that might have been difficult to show on screen.
Perhaps
would have maybe.
Yeah, sorry, Chris.
I would have maybe showed something like, I don't know, we have this words of command, for example, in Tolkien, so where speech or song or something, like he has a really dark song he sings. There was this battle with Finrod, with of the battles of where they both had like songs of power and something like this, which might seem strange in a show, but I could imagine that this might how the volcano resonates maybe with Sauron or something like that.
That's how I would have done it. Like, that's what I was thinking. It would have been a kind of invocation of power or something like that. It has to be Sauron putting his will into what he's desiring, his designs.
Yeah.
It has to be something like that, rather than like shining light from his hands or something. It would be words. Something that's, again, it's maybe difficult to show on screen, and they've went with this kind of easy way to show it, but it's it's kind of a lost opportunity, I think.
I was thinking, actually, if they wanted to try and include something visually, technically in the lore, if I remember correctly, through Barad-dûr, Sauron kind of weaves this like thick black, I wouldn't call it smoke, but it was to cover his land. It was beyond the smoke of Mount Doom. It was like this spell of darkness, which covered the sky. So perhaps they could always use something like that visually to show him kind of activating the Mount Doom together with the words of power. Like, I could see it working if it's done subtly enough.
It could have just been like you're saying, Sauron kind of standing there, almost like the. I know it didn't happen in the books, but Saruman in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, and he's trying to get the mountain and the lightning to react in a certain way. You could easily have had Sauron kind of standing there, speaking, some ancient language or whatever, not explaining what it is he's saying, but it's obvious that he's forcing a change in the world through the power he holds, or something like that. And that could have been a cool scene to see. That you would have had to have revealed Sauron by now, but I think the potential for something like that, and that could have worked.
Yeah, I mean, there would definitely be ways to kind of do if they wanted to do something magical in this direction, for sure. Do you have anything to add or want to discuss? Because we are basically over time already a bit. So
maybe expectations for the next episode.
Yeah, definitely. I would still cover, but maybe another point to this particular part, or to another scene that you maybe have forgotten.
Oh, I've got one very quick one to get your thoughts on, because a lot of people were talking about it. It'll be really brief. What do you think of the extended orc brutality scene with the eyeball? And a lot of people have been talking about that. Do you think that was cool, or do you think it was over the top? I know that's not the most deep point to make, but it seems to be a lot of people talking about it, where the orcs having the fight with Arundir, and there's just this really long shot of a kind of gore shot, and just wondered what you guys thought about
that. I enjoyed the grit. Yeah, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Carl.
Personally, I enjoyed that, the grittiness when it comes to orcs. Like, even in the books, we know they did some pretty messed up stuff, and battle is ugly. The suffering of all of these things, bringing that grit, and I don't want to say suffering, but it's kind of suffering. It makes the battle more realistic. So sure, it's gory, but it's for me, it fits what's going on. I don't mind these things. I kind of I'd rather have them than not.
Yeah, make it like PG, where you don't see any violence in a violent fight.
Mm-hmm. And also, compared to the first episode, I feel the orcs are slowly losing that fear factor, like something which I didn't like about the main trilogy. Orcs, they kind of, I wouldn't say goofy, but you could rarely feel the real threat of the orcs. And in my opinion, in the first few episodes of the Rings of Power, they really nailed it. You could feel that the orcs are a real threat, and it's slowly been diminishing with each episode. Like, even in the last one, when during the battle scene, when they throw those carts on fire, like the orcs kind of, they react in a bit of a dumb way. It's like you can't take them as seriously, and I really don't want them to go down that path. I'd love the orcs to remain like they elicit a fear, they're a threat, and I really hope they manage to maintain that, because
they do kill elves. That's you're right about the. I don't always want to compare this with a completely different thing, which is the trilogy, but they're like cannon fodder in that. It's just when you want to see like the fight with on the screen just now. It wasn't just a case of I'll handle you easily and then I'll just cut your head off. He was getting kind of thrown about and hurt by the orc. It's they're actually supposed to be terrifying. They're not meant to be pathetic. So I agree with that. It's also one of those things where, as he's getting an eye ripped out and all that stuff, he's still wanting to kind of murder you. It's not you'd have to have an orc for something like that, where it's like he's just not going to stop being violent towards you. So it's I like that. Plus I like a bit of gore, so I quite like that part.
I didn't mind too much. I was a bit surprised though, because in Germany it's rated 12 or something, so I felt okay, it's maybe a bit young for that kind of. So it depends on what audience they want to reach, but yeah, we have it now. I know it's a lot of debate. Some feels was maybe a bit too over the top. Maybe him stabbing the eye, I could maybe live with that, but the the black blood dripping out of the eye on his face, it was maybe a bit much. But I don't know. It's I don't mind it personally, but I would definitely would not have expected it, and it felt a bit like we already saw a bit of people getting cut, the Bronwyn cutting the head of the orc off, and so on. There were definitely quite a few scenes already, but it feels like this episode, maybe due to a change of directors, got a new new quality of explicit violence, if that makes sense. So I found that a bit surprising, at least. But yeah, I don't mind too much, to be honest. But if it's not just if it's not getting too overboard from here, we will see. But of course, you are right. The orcs did some pretty messed up stuff, and there is of course also some violence in Tolkien's writing, because war is not pretty, right? And it's
Yeah. Just Chris, again, as another point I'd like to quickly bring up is I feel this episode they kind of didn't manage to establish the threat levels. So like the orcs were held back by common villagers, and then when the Númenóreans came, I didn't feel that the Númenóreans were let's say a greater race of man. You know, when it comes to fighting, they were quite even with the orcs, or you know what I mean. I would have loved to see. I wouldn't want, not the Númenóreans. I guess the Númenórean superiority, you know, in terms of warfare, in terms of organization, in terms of did you get that grand feeling that these guys are way beyond the men we've seen before? And I didn't get that. Like their combat could be literally the same as the Gondorians we see in the trilogy, the Rohirrim, and I'm not saying that real nobility when compared to or that grandeur or skill level which they're supposed to have.
That's true. I mean, they maybe try to go a bit for it with the villagers to say, yeah, I just fought only like 3 orcs and the rest were villagers that you just killed, dressed as orcs. So maybe they try to reduce the expectation, but I agree, it still felt like it was a bit like Bronwyn killing that orc at the beginning and so on, even though the other villager got murdered. But
Plot armor.
Stuff like that always makes circumvents this a little bit, this or reduces the threat level. If that makes sense. I definitely agree with you there. I would also like to keep it kind of high, but yeah, I feel like it worked out for me for the most part here in this episode, but especially like in these battles. With the villagers, they really tried to keep it high, especially when suddenly the orcs were hitting their shots. That was impressive to see. Considering how what was it, episode 4 or so ended, that was that made me that was a scene I didn't like at all. But with Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo escaping out of the forest, and the orcs were just standing there, not even moving, and not a single arrow hit. It's like here it got a little bit better, so I was kind of okay with it, especially with this huge villager reveal, which I also found was definitely an interesting scene to see. Okay, they just basically killed their neighbors and didn't know, and that's what kind of this messed up situation and war and stuff makes you do, and that is I found that was a pretty strong scene as well. But yeah, we will see how it continues. I mean, in a way, if they show like Galadriel or so, she of course probably mows through it. In this context, as you said it quite well, that with the Númenóreans, it could have felt a greater achievement for them killing the orcs. And I also would have wished, for example, that Elendil would have slain a few more orcs before. I can get that he gets surrounded by orcs and then maybe pulled off his horse. I can kind of get this, but I would have wished for like a longer, stronger build up for him that we see in this battle. So
true.
That I felt a bit underwhelmed. Like it's Elendil. Like that's the guy who with Galad overthrows Sauron and Isildur. Even though they both die in the process, Isildur then can cut off, spoiler, the ring. So that like I would have imagined Elendil to be like a true force of nature for a moment at least.
Yes,
that would have been cool. Felt a bit underwhelmed by that, but probably there was something filmed like this, and since the show having very limited time, it was maybe cut out or something. But I guess since we are so late already, I would now maybe ask what are your expectations for episode 7, except you have something really important still to add. Maybe that the armor of Miriel really looks fantastic.
True. Okay. Yeah, it's nice.
Also, I like how when the one how she smiles, like she feels like she really wants to help these people. I felt like she portrayed this really well, and you thought, okay, I help these people. Where's the darkness my father was talking about? And then, Like, yeah, this scene here in particular could have been a bit longer with Elendil. Like, he slays this orc and goes on, but he's surrounded pretty fast here.
I agree with you, Chris, on these things. Just maybe on a side note, also, if maybe their armor included more of the like bird, what are they, seagull feathers and all of those things. Like, again, just small nitpicking in terms of bringing about the Minoran there again.
But yeah, I said, what are your expectations of episode 7 then?
I actually haven't seen the teaser. Like, I usually avoid them just to not get spoiled. So I'm curious to see the aftermath of the volcanic eruption, if how people survived, if the orcs are somehow going to be freed, if Adar is going to survive. Apparently, again, I think probably the Meteor Man will feature a lot, and it would be cool if we learn more about him. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of avoid the whole southern battle for a while and focus on the northern events, maybe back to the whole Celebrimbor, dwarfs, Elrond, and Meteor Man.
Even any thoughts?
Well, it's a kind of tough one to predict because we're kind of thinking more about the finale, and I was saying that I think that's when we'll see Sauron. But I also think possibly in the next episode, or maybe in the finale as well, we'll probably see the Balrog, I think.
Yeah, it's true.
We saw the Balrog at the end of that trailer, didn't we? The one before the show came out, and if I'm right, I think that Balrog clip isn't the same one as that episode 5 Balrog, which seemed to be almost like a kind of moving picture, kind of flashback kind of thing. It wasn't the same as that Balrog that we see. I think I might be wrong there, but so that's obviously going to happen because of the dwarves mining deep. Maybe it's a bit soon for that, but I don't know why they would show the Balrog in that case. But I think that's going to happen. But yeah, I think they're going to go back to the Harfoots as well, unfortunately, and I don't really know. The stranger is going to reveal more about himself, or there'll be more kind of clues about who or what he is. And I think the episode's called The Eye or something as well, isn't it? So maybe Sauron's coming earlier than we think, but it's a hard one to predict because it's so close to the finale. A lot of what I think might happen might actually be in episode 8. So it might just be a complete build-up episode to the finale.
Would you say you look forward? Are you curious what will happen in the next episode?
I'm kind of just going with the flow with this show. I'm not really excited to see episodes, which is a bit strange. But from talking about it tonight, episode 6, I'm interested in seeing the aftermath of Mount Doom. I want to see. I'm kind of eager to see if we are going to get a shot of Sauron or something like that. I'm looking forward to that. I'm not kind of looking forward to the Harfoot stuff. That's not ripped me at the moment, But yeah, I really think there's going to be a Balrog or something like that. The dwarf story has to go somewhere, and I think that's probably where it's going to go. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I'm not like dreading watching them or anything. But I'm hoping it's kind of upwards trajectory and it doesn't go back down to maybe the weaker earlier episodes. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Carl, anything you want to add?
Nah, I'm good, Chris. I mean, I'm looking forward to the episodes. I enjoy as much material as we can get. Like, I actually wish the season would last longer. It's still fun to be in Middle Earth, even if there are some changes I'm not happy with. But I'm enjoying it for the most part.
Yeah, I have to say, after episode 6, I'm really curious where they go from here. Personally, as you already mentioned, like we have to see what's going on with Elrond and Durin. We have to see what happens now in Mordor. What are the dynamics now there? Like that might be a big change. Who survived this volcanic explosion? What is going on? Etc. It's I'm really curious to see what this is, because this must change like quite a few things. Maybe Galadriel needs to get some realization, and I also agree, like my imagination as well, like in the last episode they will, like maybe the last shot or at the very end we will get like the Sauron reveal, maybe earlier even, really hard to tell. Like if it's really called like the Eye and is hinting at Sauron or something. What would be interesting in this context is like there was also the episode called Adar, and Adar only showed up at the very end for a very brief moment, and it was even blurred. So maybe they go for a similar approach again with this episode, and maybe at the end of 7, Sauron shows up for a brief moment. We get a glimpse or an idea. It would be definitely interesting. Also, I kind of understand why people don't like the Harfoot stuff. I'm kind of like this section though. At least I like the actors. I feel like they do a really good job. Like Nori is really fantastic. The actor is really doing a phenomenal job with Poppy. They have a really great chemistry.
Even the accent. You like the accents for the Harfoots?
Yeah,
Irish. I'm sure
that might be really a thing I would like to ask you, Stephen, because for me as a not native speaker, I have like potentially a different relationship to those English accents.
Yeah.
How do you? What is your perception as a native speaker? That would be very interesting to see.
I find it really weird. It's like the Harfoots have this mix of kind of comical Irish, where it's clearly that exaggerated stereotypical Irish voice, but it's mixed with that what you'd call West Country English, the one that Sam was trying in the trilogy. It's like this kind of mix of that, so you can kind of see what they're going for, but it's a bit on the nose with the whole Harfoots sound Irish and they're travellers as well. It's kind of strange to hear, but the Scottish ones are interesting as well, because there's 2 Durins, and the eldest one actually is Scottish, and you can tell if you're from here. And I think the younger one's from Wales, but he's kind of doing that Gimli kind of accent as well, and it's just strange to hear. That's that kind of stereotypical the dwarves have to speak with Scottish accents kind of thing, but I like to be represented anyway, so it doesn't take me out of it or anything like that, but I think the Harfoots, the accents of the Harfoots are very weird to me. It's probably adding to what I don't like about them, but yeah, it's again, that's not I'm not sitting raging at the TV or anything because of the accents. It's as long as the elder Durin gets more screen time, I think he's a great actor and a great character as well. So I think there's going to be more of him in this next episode. And yeah, I also like the idea of the different races, different regions having their own accents. I think that obviously makes sense, and I'm glad they're doing that as well.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting too, because like I said, as not native speaker, I don't know the nuances simply. So for me, it kind of works. Like for the dwarves, I feel also like an accent makes completely sense, because they never speak Khuzdul to strangers, but learn their languages. And so I would assume even when they learn other languages that they have a little accent speaking so.
Yeah,
so giving them one makes perfectly sense, I feel. But I can imagine that as a native speaker, it might be completely weird. But for example, in the German, I watch it in English, though, with with subtitles, because sometimes it's really hard to understand even some of the accents. And in the German version, there are no accent at all, because it's a standard in the German localization stuff that you don't go for the accents, because some accents in German simply sound very funny. Like just imagine giving the dwarves like a Bavarian accent or something like that. I could not take the show any serious anymore. It's like it's, or I don't know, like from Saxon or something like that. There are some really like, I don't want to make fun of those accents, but it would sound strange because it would it's so unusual for German localization to hear accents. Schwäbisch would also be really funny. But yeah,
it's interesting you're saying that though, because I'm going on about it's nice to hear these kind of like maybe the Scottish accents, but then someone like Disa, who I think is actually a far better character than I was thinking she was going to be getting into the show, but her accent's absolutely atrocious, and she's trying to sound like the other actors, a few of them Scottish and that as well, but she's not kind of pulling that accent off. So I don't know if that would be the same thing where just imagine if you've got your German localization and there was someone who wasn't German trying to sound German. It's it sounds like they're in like theatre putting the voice on. It's so that is strange. But I think Helen from Clueless Fangirl, she was saying one of the things that's bad about your German translation is that does everyone not sound the same? That's one of the bad things about it. It's like they're all sharing in this same kind of accent, and that's what's good about the original, the English show, where it's like you're actually getting all these varied accents, even if they're good or bad. At least there's a variation there across the board.
Yeah. I agree with her. Like that, it works. For me, it works really well in the English. Though I also really like Disa as a character, but I also notice you definitely. I could imagine she really tries, but of course it probably doesn't work because it must be really difficult to get learn nuances of accents like this. Must be really, really difficult to learn. And it's.
Would you notice, Chris, though, that she's not native? Like the accent is off for Disa.
Yeah, I felt like it was a bit off at times, a bit American at times.
These things, like even the Hobbits, they sounded fine to me, and even the dwarves, like I would have had no idea who's actually Scottish and who isn't.
Same. So I only noticed with Disa a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I sound like a dwarf.
Yeah, no, I mean Scottish. No.
I mean, you listen to us how we speak English, and it also sounds often probably a bit.
If anything, Stephen, though, the dwarves are like the coolest part of the series, man. So it's.
I've no problem with them sounding. Yeah, I think to me now it would be very weird if the dwarves were the ones that sounded Irish, for example. I just don't think that would work. We're just so used to them sounding Scottish by now. It's just it throws you a little when you can tell that an actor's maybe American or something. I don't think any American can do a Scottish accent, so it's when they're mixed in with people doing a good accent that you're always just going to notice it. But that's just how it is.
And I think the Scottish accent also has probably a lot of nuances.
Very difficult to do, to be honest. Yeah. It's very, very few non-Scots have ever tricked me in films, but there's a few that have. But you can usually just tell they all sound like Shrek. Trying to do it,
I can imagine that it must be a bit difficult. So
did they actually have Scottish accent, or because I don't remember the voices too well, or was it like a mix?
And what? Sorry.
In the Hobbit movies.
No, there was a bit of a mix again, but a few of them were doing it. Balin and Dwalin were definitely doing it, especially with where they're actually from. So it worked for them. There was a few that were sounding quite Irish as well. There was Irish actors there, and big mix, which.
And Torians would have been English, or.
Yeah, he's an English actor, and he was doing that kind of dramatic, strong English accent, and he wasn't trying to sound Scottish at all. But just listen to the difference between Dwalin and Thorin, for example. You should be able to really tell which one's actually Scottish, and that's why Dwalin's the best dwarf in the Hobbit.
Yeah, I can imagine. But very interesting. Joe asks, is Shrek's accent good?
No, it's terrible. That's
Okay.
Mike Myers. Shrek uses the same voice that if you've ever seen Austin Powers,
Yeah.
there's the Scottish villain in it. Don't know if I can say his name if you'll get
Yeah,
demonetized if I say it.
yeah.
He's doing the same voice there. It's that really exaggerated, drunk kind of voice, but it's we kind of find it funny. We don't get offended at it or anything like that. It's all in good fun, you know.
Yeah.
Mike Myers doesn't have Scottish. Isn't he like half Scottish or something?
No, he's one of these Canadians that thinks he's Scottish. He's not really.
Okay.
Sorry, any Canadians out there that think they're Scottish, but they're not.
But it's really interesting to hear, because like I can't relate to this because in German they only speak like standard high German, whatever you call it in English, Hochdeutsch. It's kind of fascinating to hear. Like, I mean, I can imagine it must be really annoying at times if you hear all the time the fake accents and you are from Scotland. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to get your perspective there. But yeah, since we. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You're just about to wrap up. We're going all night talking about accents.
Yeah. But if you want to add something, feel free to do. Like if you have time.
No, that's completely fine.
Okay, then I would say we went overboard as to be predicted and talked about accents. But it was a lot of fun today again. I hope people enjoyed this. So maybe you guys can tell what is coming up next, maybe to your channel or whatever. Anything's planned. I'm not sure. Maybe let's start with the Red Book with Stephen.
Yeah, well, I have a few videos coming up. I'm actually going to do my own. I don't cover Rings of Power on the show, on the channel. But I do have a live stream of my own coming up after season 1's finished. So that's at the top of my channel. You can see that, and it'd be good if people could come along to that. And my next, real video is a podcast episode about the greatest elf who ever lived, Fëanor. And I'm also planning 2 other videos this month if I've got time. I want to do a video on what exactly is the fading of the elves. I think that's an interesting topic. And I'm going to do a Halloween episode about the Arrow Wights. So that's what I've got. That's what I've got planned. If I've got time to do all that, it seems like an awful lot. Yeah, plenty coming up.
Oh, awesome. Carl?
So from my end, I actually wanted to start making videos again last week, but I had fallen ill. So hopefully I'll be active again on my channel, both live streams and regular videos. There are a few long-term projects which I've actually been working on for half a year, including trying to recreate certain events in Middle-earth with voice actors, like trying to write a script for what the dialogue might have been like. It's a bit abstract, but hopefully if I manage to pull it off, I'll publish it on the channel. It's taking a lot of work. There's a lot of people I need to contact, hiring various voice actors through Fiverr. I had also reached out to my community if anyone was interested for dwarven voices. I got quite a few Scottish accents, which Stephen might want to review now. Because
I can contribute if you want.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I'm looking forward again to publishing more often and being active again, because I really miss the whole community part of Lord of the Rings and Geekzone, I suppose.
If you need a German accent that's really exaggerated.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind, Chris.
I can do the German accent very well.
Yeah. And we'll have to see what sort of character or race in Middle-earth will have it, though, Chris. Where we can fit it in.
What? Can you repeat again?
Like, I have to find a sort of a character that can use that accent, if you know what I mean. Like, so for the Scots, I needed a ton of dwarves. So I immediately went to find the best Scottish guys on Fiverr who can do fantasy dwarven accents. So I have to think about what sort of creature uses a German one in Middle-earth.
It's a difficult question, to be honest. Like I can't think of can't think of anybody right now. Like, who could speak German?
I don't know. I mean,
Really, and not
we'll
that
figure it
many.
out, though. We'll find something, Chris.
Yeah, maybe Chad has some good ideas. But yeah, on my channel, what's coming up there tomorrow? I will watch the episode early, and then we'll make a review and then stream. I think that is the order I try again. So stream might be later than usual. Maybe even Saturday, because I try to get my review out. One time I want to have the review out as fast as possible. Maybe on the same day on Friday. So it would be awesome if I could accomplish that, even though it will be tough. And yeah, but there will be content on this channel about Rings of Power, which I'm covering. Then we make, as said, review, analysis stream, probably go in a couple of hours, and then we also do a watch party at some point, maybe Saturday or some. What is it? What is the name? Yes, not Saturday. Sunday. That's the word. Just couldn't. What was it? What was the day called? Sunday maybe or Monday, something like that. And maybe I'll also do watch a bit on Twitch, some episodes. There will be that. And then we are getting close to the end already. And after that, I will also return to making book content again, and we'll cover complete Who is Elrond. 2 episodes left, and we will have the 8 to 9 hour video. I will make a all-in-one version of it. And then we cover Galadriel completely, kind of. That's my current plan for videos on this channel. And yeah, try to also make something for the German channel, maybe also Rings of Power related. We will find out. I hope that wraps us up here decently at the very end. I guess we could have went on for multiple hours from this point here. I feel it's always like that. But yeah, that's definitely a good thing. I really enjoyed the talk. Thank you to both of you for your time and for discussing Rings of Power episode 6 with me. And yeah, we'll see who I get. Maybe I need to come ask you again next week if I don't find guests. So
that was a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Chris.
Yes, thanks very much. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really, I enjoyed it as well. And let me just see. Somewhere here must see credits scene. I don't see it right now. There it is. I hope it works. Sometimes my OBS crashes when I use this, but okay, it works. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you, chat. As always, I try to read a bit in chat this time, but sometimes, like when you have guests and they have a good discussion, I don't want to say, oh, by the way, in chat said this. You know, it's always a bit difficult. For that, we have the analysis stream where I'm a lot closer to chat. So check that out if you have this. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, chat, for also asking some good questions. It seems like people also enjoyed the stream. So there's not much, I think, left to say for us. Then I wish you people a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you for watching. And goodbye. See you next time.